Okay. Is that us? Yeah. Okay, so just for anyone in the public gallery, you can use your mobile phone devices through a Wi-Fi connection. All devices should be muted. Password details are available on the gallery rules for anybody wanting to connect to Assembly's Wi-Fi network. 3G, 4G and 5G should not be used, and no recordings or photographs are to be taken. So welcome everybody to the Committee for Infrastructure today, where we have the Minister joining us for an evidence session along with the Permanent Secretary. So if members are content, we'll proceed through the agenda as follows. So any apologies today? I have an apology from Stephen Dunn. Any other apologies? And Keith Buchanan is joining online. So we'll move, and Mark. Hello, Mark. So we'll move to declarations of interest. To remind members that they are obliged to declare any relevant financial or other interests which might reasonably be thought by others to influence their approach to the matter under consideration. Any members who have interest to declare in relation to today's business should do so now or when the particular matter arises in the meeting. So I ask, does any member have any interest which they wish to declare at this stage?
Just in relation to of a family member who works in DFA, works for DFA. Sure, I'll declare that, yeah.
I'm going to declare my usual declarations. I'm still waiting on an OT test. And a family member works for DVA.
Do you want a wee bit of help getting that wee MOT? One of our offices maybe help you
out? Okay, members are content. All Oh, Keith, are you indicating there?
Yeah. Just MOT as well. I've an MOT request in as well. Sure.
Okay, thank you. Okay, move to chairperson's business. There is no chairperson's business, so I would like to just say, obviously, we're aware that TransLink workers have rejected their pay offer, and we just hope that that resolves itself, hopefully in the very near future, and as soon as possible. So we move to the draft minutes at page 7. There's draft minutes of the proceeding for the meeting on the 6th of March 2024, and you'll see that there is an amendment in the table packs as well. So can I seek agreement that members are content that the minutes are a true and accurate reflection of the meeting on the 6th of March 2024?
Agreed.
All agreed?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Matters arising at page 16 is matters arising from the meeting on the 6th of March 2024. I ask members to note, and if they have any issues they wish to raise arising from the meeting, they can do so now. And also at page 19 there's an outstanding committee request for information for noting as well. So is there any issues any members want to raise? All content? Yeah. Okay, we're moving to item 6 then, is the correspondence. So at page 31 you'll see the correspondence memo. There's a few things we need to discuss arising from the correspondence. At page 33 there's correspondence from Northern Ireland Water providing a response to issues arising at the committee's meeting on the 21st of February. And I would maybe ask members just in relation to that, if there's any outstanding issues that they have. We do have the Minister responding to the committee today during oral evidence, so that might be prudent for members to raise any issues today coming out of that letter, if you're content with that.
Yeah. Chair, yeah.
At page 42 is a correspondence from the Committee for the Economy relating to concerns with planning delays and renewable energy infrastructure. So I'm seeking agreement that we request a copy of the response from the department to the Committee for Economy once issued. Is members content with that approach?
Sure.
At page 45, you will see correspondence from a member of the public in respect of delays in progressing York Street interchange. He does raise some very valid points in relation to it. So I'm proposing that we maybe request a response from the department to the view expressed in the correspondence. Would members be content with that?
Content, Chair.
Yeah. At page 46, there's correspondence from the Maritime Belfast Trust extending an invitation to host the committee to understand its rules and frameworks. I'm seeking agreement to consider again when considering key issues raised in the correspondence. Are members content with that approach? Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, at page 48, there's correspondence from the Belfast Harbour Trust offering to provide the committee with a business briefing and a visit to the port. And on this piece of correspondence, I'm seeking agreement to receive written evidence in the first instance so that the Belfast Harbour can outline the work. Is all members content with that approach?
Content, Chair.
Yeah. At page 49, there's a response from the Minister for Infrastructure to issues arising from the Committee for Infrastructure meeting on the 21st of February 2024. And obviously, again, with the Minister coming to the committee today, and if members are content, just that we can raise any outstanding issues from that correspondence today. Content?
Mm-hmm.
And then at page 53, there's correspondence from the Competition and Markets Authority to highlight its role and areas of work which may be of interest to the committee. And again, seeking agreement for the committee to consider this again when considering the key issues raised in the correspondence. Are members content with that approach?
Great. Yep.
And at page 56, there's correspondence from the Motorcycle Action Group requesting to meet the committee. And again, on this one, I think if the committee consider again when considering key issues raised in the correspondence, happy with that approach? Yeah. And then lastly, there's just some letters there to note from the Infrastructure Minister, the Department and the Examiner of Statutory Rules. So are members just content to note those pieces of correspondence?
Great, Chair.
Okay, so we'll now move to have the Minister for Infrastructure. You will see that the Minister has provided his first day brief. At page 84 is the Clerk's memo, DFI's legislative programme, policy priorities, financial position including actions taken in the absence of ministers. At page 91, the Infrastructure Minister's first day brief. And I'm just seeking agreement from everybody that the evidence is recorded by Hansard today.
Great.
All members content? Welcome to the Infrastructure Minister and to the Permanent Secretary, Dennis McMahon. We're very glad to have you today, and we're looking forward to the briefing today. If you are content, I would just like to go into closed session to start with, if that's okay.
That suits members, yes.
And then we'll open up in public session then after that, if you're content.
Okay, yes.
Committee Room 29. Sound. 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 Committee Room 29, 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 Sound. Committee Room 29.
Just wait for Hansard.
Okay. Okay, we're now in open session again, so thank you to the Minister and the Permanent Secretary. So if you want to give us a brief overview now in terms of the department and yourselves just for a few short minutes, and then I'll open the floor to questions from members, so thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I'm delighted to once again have taken on the role of Minister for Infrastructure, a portfolio that is so important to the daily lives of all our people, our communities, our environment and our economy. I welcome the fact that I'm here today to discuss with you many of the important issues which we need to address in the future. Committees, as you know, are really important. They provide an essential scrutiny role that involves asking questions, sometimes difficult questions, to ministers and challenging what the department does. I want to stress at the start of this meeting that I genuinely want to work constructively with you now and in the future. I'm sure there are things in which we will have different views, but I am keen to have a constructive debate about how we improve our public services within the constrained budgets that we have. I would, however, ask that you, the committee, not only challenges me and the department, but it also helps us to identify solutions and bring forward its own ideas on how we can improve things within the budgets available to us. The parties who make up the executive have a lot of work to deliver improvements to deliver improvements to public services. I am convinced that we will make greatest progress if we can work openly and in a spirit of partnership. Take planning as an example. I have made clear my commitment to ensuring that our planning system operates in an efficient and effective way. However, the issue of planning is not just for my department alone. All must play their part. Several departments are integral parts of the planning system, acting as a statutory consultee for planning applications, and we must ensure the whole system is properly resourced and staffed. I'm also sure you're aware of the huge challenges that we face, none more so than the constrained budget available to us. I am very aware that the underinvestment and cuts by the British Government in recent years has meant that my department has struggled to maintain the level of service it would like to deliver, and indeed that it needs to deliver. This is manifest at a strategic level, as is the case of our water and sewers infrastructure, but also at a local level, for example, because we lack the funding to repair many of the potholes necessary to make our roads safer for all road users. Addressing this will be a priority for me, and I know it will be an important area of focus for you too. You will have seen that since taking up my post, I have already prioritised this. One of the first announcements is for an extra £1 million investment in road maintenance for pothole repairs. A further £8.1 million capital investment has also been made available for structural road maintenance. This additional £9.1 million since coming into office is a clear statement of my intent. Infrastructure delivers for people every day by providing and maintaining the things we all need to go about our daily lives, the things which make this place work. It also delivers positive and transformative change in people's daily lives. We can shape a better, healthier future for everyone by decarbonising key services, by investing in climate adaptation measures and biodiversity, and by encouraging and facilitating active travel for all. At the same time, we can drive and support economic productivity through the development of vital projects, policy and legislation. Getting infrastructure right and investing in it appropriately can deliver positive change. It can create the foundations for a more productive and prosperous economy and for better rural and urban communities. Take a step back from any new initiative and any new development, and you will find that the right infrastructure has to be in place, not only to make it a reality, but also to make it work. In other words, it all starts here. That's why I welcome the Taoiseach's recent announcement of investment from the Shared Island Fund, investment which will help us to build the A5, develop the Narrowwater Bridge, and progress the establishment of an early rail service between Belfast and Dublin. My department will build on current engagements and collaboration with our colleagues in the south and across these islands as we deliver positive changes for people we all serve. Projects such as the All Island Rail Review, which opens up a host of possibilities for greater connection. To that end, I look forward to attending the first meeting of the North-South Ministerial Council and the British-Irish Council to engage with colleagues from across these islands. In finishing, I want to pay tribute to the staff within my department and its arm's-length bodies. I have been struck by the skill and dedication of the DFI family in the work they do, both operationally and behind the scenes. They deliver essential public services 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, sometimes in the most trying weather conditions. It's only right that I pay tribute to their dedication at the start of this session. I hope that you will join me in recognising their hard work, especially in this last number of years when we haven't had an executive, an assembly or a committee. Thank you for the opportunity to address the committee.
Thank you. So I just want to start off with an initial question which is not related to a theme per se but will be of interest to the committee, and that's just if you want to outline any planned proposed primary legislation that may come to the committee during the current mandate. I know that the department are thinking of one in particular, but if there is any others and if you want to detail some of that information.
Yes. So we have a number of pieces of legislation that we plan to bring forward, and we have already given an outline of some of this to the executive in a briefing paper. There are 5 potential bills which have been identified for the department. Firstly is the Water Flooding and Drainage Bill, the purpose of which is in relation to powers for additional water shortage measures, new measures for dealing with drainage, flooding and some technical and procedural improvement to existing legislation. The public consultation on this policy proposal has been completed. The bill is included in the draft programme of executive bills for introduction in 2024 before the end of this calendar year. The Ports and Harbour Bill. There are currently three main elements to the proposed bill: changing the ONS classification of the trust ports by removing the legislative controls that are exercised by the department, provisions aimed at giving the trust ports extended commercial powers, and provisions aimed at statutory harbour authorities relating to marine safety. Substantial policy development has been undertaken, and key issues have been identified in conjunction with key stakeholders. Subject to agreement, the bill may be introduced in the first quarter of 2025, the second year of the legislative programme. Third piece of legislation is the Railroad Transport Bill. The TROS bill will be significant in size, will cut across a large number of policy areas, and policy development is at various stages. The bill is likely to be broken into 6 parts, and each bill has the potential to be taken forward as a separate bill. Depending on progress and agreement, the bill could form part of Year 3 of the Executive Legislative Programme in 2026. The further piece of legislation are transport decarbonisation at initial policy scoping stage, the Planning Amendment Bill at initial scoping stage, and as members will know, we deal with a significant amount of legislation through secondary legislation, and a number of areas we're looking at is reservoirs, electric vehicle mandate, free period products, and the committee will be briefed on all these matters in due course.
Okay, thank you. We'll have a busy time ahead. Look, just to kick off on, one of the themes, I suppose, that's coming out, and I think the committee would be keen to look at MOT, flooding, road and transport, NI water sewage treatment, and planning as well. So if I kick off just in relation to MOT, and we did have the debate in the Assembly. So last week, officials came to the committee and they said that they weren't working on biannual testing. And this week you announced that you are going to be looking at that. So what changed between last Wednesday and Monday?
I have been engaging with my officials, obviously in relation to MOTs, practically since I came back into office. I have been gathering my own thoughts around this matter, and we've been looking at various proposals. So what changed was I asked my officials to do it. And in fairness to officials, they follow instructions from their minister. They had been working during the time the Executive Assembly was down on keeping the place afloat, in fairness to them. There is now political direction available to them, and I have asked them now to look at that. And as I said in the Assembly on Monday, it's not a simple equation. There is a number of factors we have to take into account about this. Safety being one of them, costings being another, and is there potential? And while the majority of responses to the call for evidence were in favour of biannual testing, 2 major blocks were against it. 3 major blocks were against it. The automotive industry, the police, who are the enforcement agency in regards to this matter and have a particular interest in road safety, and the insurance industry. So those factors have to be taken into account, but I am looking at all options to ensure that we make service available better to those who are waiting on an MOT.
But you've ruled out private testing altogether?
Yeah, well, I think we would be abandoning our workforce for a start, which is I don't think anybody would wish to do. And when you drill down into it, it's more expensive for private testing in England. People argue it is more accessible. It may well be more accessible, but it's more expensive. And there are concerns about fraud in that system as well. Another matter to take into account as well, I don't know how easy it is for some members around the table to get an appointment with their local garage. I find it quite difficult. We'll be putting extra work on local garages as well, which means even the maintenance of vehicles will become more difficult for people as well. So I have ruled out privatisation of the service for all those reasons.
Okay, and then lastly for me on MOTs, you'll probably be glad to hear, but in terms of the cracks, and I'm talking about the new cracks that have appeared on MOT testing equipment, when did the Minister first become aware of that issue, and can he detail, has there been any increase since the 16 that DVA have announced?
I came aware of that incident within the first few days of coming into office, engaged with DVA colleagues. DVA colleagues. And I can understand and quite understand why people are concerned about this issue because of the history back into 2019 and the disruption that caused to MOTs. I have been assured that this issue is not the same issue as the previous case. These defects were detected as a result of measures that were introduced after the 2019 scenario, and they were detected by an independent assessor. They have been graded as Class C, which is the lowest grading of concern in regards to these matters. I have been told that there's no health and safety concerns and none of the lifts are out of commission. There has been one part of a lift that has been sent to the manufacturer for testing to see how we can resolve the issue or why this issue has come about, but it's not in regards a concern that there is a health and safety issue or that we are going to have to close down any of these lifts. If further information comes to light in regards to this, I will report that to the committee, and I can assure the committee if there are health and safety concerns raised with me about any aspect of equipment we are using, I will ensure health and safety comes first.
And just, I'd ask there, are you aware of any increase in that 16 at the moment?
I'm not aware of any increase, but if there has been an increase, I let the committee know. There are continuing tests and observations of all our equipment ongoing. So you would expect that the more you test, the more faults you'll find, which is one way a good thing. But I'm not made aware of any significant increase in that number to date.
Okay, thank you. Deputy Chair.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Thanks, Minister, for those answers so far. Just teasing into the 2-year aspect of what the Chair was referring to, I know there were concerns, particularly, as you say, from the PSNI and the automotive industry, particularly that you could have a commercial vehicle that's doing 120,000 miles a year, so could have $250,000 up by the time it's getting its second year. Is it a possibility that while looking at maybe day-to-day vehicles, looking at 5 and 7 and 9 years in a 2-year cycle, there's also an option to factor in at mileage levels as well, or would that be beyond the scope of the system that's in place right now?
It's certainly a question I think we should examine, but maybe the collection of that data and how you analyse that data may be the challenge there. You may be relying on the owner of the vehicle reporting that in, and I'm sure the majority of owners of vehicles will do that, but if they don't, then you're into a problem. As we examine this issue, all options are going to be available, and obviously we'll have to report back to the committee, and the committee will take views on these matters as well and may have opinions and views which we have to feed into it. As I've said previously, it's not a simple equation. Let's move to 2 years, but it may be necessary. It may be something we can do, and I've as I've said, I've asked officials to examine it closely.
Okay. And just like within DVA, but on to driving instructor or driving tests, there appears, certainly anecdotally from the evidence I'm getting from both people trying to access them and driving instructors, that we have a growing backlog and difficulty across the country in accessing them. It's obviously something you're aware of. What measures are being put in place to try and alleviate the pressure and the ability to get a test right now?
We're recruiting more examiners, and one of the side benefits of us recruiting more MOT inspectors is that some MOT inspectors also have a dual role as test inspectors or test examiners. If we can recruit more MOT mechanics, then we'll be able to alleviate some of the pressures on our driving tests as well, so there'll be a benefit across that as well.
So thanks on that.
Okay, Keith.
Okay, I'll take a Chair, we're covering the MOT part first, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll roll my two questions together. And Minister, on Monday I referenced, some MOT centres not performing. That was referring not to individuals in the centres, but if you look at some of those centres, I'm not going to name them here, but some of them are down 19%, others 8%, 7%, 19%, 12%. So there's a lot of test centres. 2/3 of them are down in output of vehicles from January 2019 in that month, and in January 24. Now the total capacity is up, to be fair, 1,000, but there seems to be a lot of them not, keeping the same target or indeed more. So what is that down to? Is that down to staffing, or what's the reason some of those test centres are down? Now, to be fair, some of them are up 33% and 18%, but if some of those test centres weren't up, we'd have a bigger problem. So the question is around all those test centres and why are they not hitting the same targets they had in the past? And then second point on the current cracks on the lifts, what warranty or is there any cost to the public purse at the minute based on those new cracks? And is there warranty, and does the supplier of those lifts cover that cost? Indeed, any costs associated with that? Thanks.
The issue around the individual MOT centres is down to staff vacancies. We may have a higher level of staff vacancies in some centres than in others. And hopefully the recruitment campaign that we've run will help alleviate that. As I said the other day, we have 135 applications for around 50 posts now. As is the case in any recruitment drive, all those applications may not go to interview, and you have to then work out how many are successful interview, etc. around that. So that's down to. In terms of cost to the public purse, there's no cost to the public purse at this stage in relation to the newly identified cracks in the equipment. And as with all equipment, there is a period of warranty and assurance from the provider around. And as I said, the manufacturer of this equipment is currently examining one arm that has been sent to them to identify why these cracks are taking place. If, and it's a big if there is costs arise from that, then I would expect that the contractual obligations are met on all sides. And I don't have the contractual obligations in front of me, Keith, you'll appreciate. But I'm not aware of any significant costs arising at this stage, or any costs arising at this stage to the public purse. If there is, I report that back to the committee.
A quick supplementary, Chair, and then that's me done. Minister, you talked about staffing. Obviously, and you indicated the other day, let's say you need 55, whatever number the staff is. Are you content that the wages is attractive enough to hold on to them staff, that we don't have a turnover of staff? And are you concerned that you have high turnover of staff, specifically in the technicals?
There has been a high turnover of staff for a number of reasons. One, as a public sector employer, we were impacted by low public sector pay and the uncertainty around pay increases. I would hope now that has been resolved, that we have to wait on the formal announcement from the union side as to terms whether they're satisfied with the pay increase or not. The mechanics were also upgraded an additional level after a review of their posts, which also has seen an increase in their pay, which I think is a very welcome matter as well. The private sector were attracting some of our mechanics away, and I'm sure that often was the case that they came across at attractive positions. But there's also some who are coming back to us who perhaps feel now that the grass wasn't greener on the other side for a variety of reasons. So I think that DVA is an attractive employer. There's good terms and conditions. I hope now that we have improved the salaries and wages for our staff moving forward. And I think the fact that we have over 130 applications for those posts is a welcome sign.
Okay, Keith, happy enough?
Okay, thanks, Chair.
Okay, Cahill?
Yeah, thanks, Chair, and you're very welcome, Minister, and thank you for your responses and your presentation. It's just, I know we had a good debate the other day, and I mean, there were some good suggestions put out there, and I know you're looking at the issue of biennial testing, but the interesting thing for me is part of the debate, because and I just want to pick it up on it's a legislative question, really. I mean, there was a notion or an idea out there in the chamber that we could just move to private testing, to private centres, but there's more complexities out there and complexities in terms of legislative frameworks and everything else. And I mean, what we're trying to do over a period and over this mandate is trying to get the stabilisation and harmonisation and trying to address the issue. I take it there would be complications and consultations and everything arising out of if we needed any legislative change to bring in, say, even if we decided to go down the route of using some a temporary measure, say, i.e. other privatised garages or something else. There's more complexities.
Yeah, the current legislation does not allow for private MOT testing, so we would have to change the legislation, and that's how long is a piece of string to take you to change legislation. But if you were going to change legislation, you would want to do it properly and ensure that you've all your T's crossed and A's dotted. So it would take, I'm not doing it, but if you were doing it, you would have to do it properly.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, Mark.
Thank you, Chair. You're very welcome, Minister. And Dennis, I congratulate you on your appointment, permanent appointment. I suppose you were caretaker Minister previously, and commend you on your start. Dus mai, yeah, na hebra, as they say, and you've hit the ground running with some positive announcements. I'm not sure, is this the MOT round then?
Yes, it is indeed.
Yeah, I took it in the a little bit deeper.
There's 10 right?
Okay, then in terms of what Cahill was just saying, the point Cahill was making, we are a legislative assembly, and nearly everything we bring in there will require legislative change. That's what we're here to do. I concur, or I share your view on the private testing issue, Minister, and welcome, I suppose, you reopening the debate or examination of the prospect of moving to biennial testing. And I know it's far from simple. You mentioned there, I suppose, the 3 cohorts who'd expressed opposition, or at least concerns, to a move. There was the automotive industry, obviously. There'd be commercial interests there. The insurance industry might have to raise premiums. They enjoy any excuse to do that. I'm surprised they're objecting to it rather than encouraging it. And the police, which I'm not sure if that's based on safety, because in terms of collision causation, it is minuscule, or if it's just down to their ability to enforce and carry out checks, which is the case now anyway, with annual testing. But that can all be thrashed out during the debate. Now, but in terms of the insurance and the concern that you, and I'm sure all of us, share about rising premiums and anything that we do that could impact on that, have you considered yet what the department can do to start bringing premiums down? Now, I know I'd met with ABI recently, and they pointed to not new legislation but existing legislation that the Assembly passed, the Road Safety Amendment Act, Road Traffic Amendment Act 2016, that had graduated driver licensing schemes and a couple of other initiatives that ABI at the time were saying would result in lower insurance costs. I don't know if the department are looking at bringing that forward.
I as you know, I have no legislative authority in relation to the insurance industry, but yes, one of the issues what insurance companies will claim why there's higher premiums is because of road accidents and injuries. They also say that the rising cost of repairs is one of their reasons, and also the significant difference between repairing an electric vehicle and the normal petrol or diesel vehicle. They say that's one of the reasons. But I'm currently engaging with my department officials around the 2016 Act to see in terms of what commencement orders need to be moved forward, including the graduated driving test, all those sorts of things. I'm looking at Mark to see, from a road safety perspective, first and foremost, what we need to bring forward and how we improve that, because as you know, our road safety, our deaths on our roads are rising dramatically. It's a deep area of concern. One factor in the biennial test which is interesting too, and we have to drill down into all these matters as we examine this. We have about a 20% fail rate on our annual thing. In the south, they have a biannual service and they have about a 50% fail rate. Now, that's just a cursory examination of the figures, and you'd have to drill down into those more to understand why that's the case. So that would be a note of concern which needs to be examined, and I'm sure the insurance companies would look at that as well. But yes, I'm looking at the 2016 Act to see how we improve road safety and what responsibilities I have and what I can do in this mandate to improve it.
50% fail rate would indicate it's a stricter examination.
It could well be, yes. Yeah.
You know, and then I just wonder if the insurance premiums reflect the concerns in the south and across the border and across Europe, I suppose, that have biennial testing. Is that reflected in insurance premiums that the ABI have expressed concerns on? In terms of your legislative intentions, Minister, or the departments, you mentioned there the Rail, Road and Transport Bill, and that would have 6 components that could be, I suppose, 6 separate bills. Almost, what are those 6 components? Do we know?
I don't have the full list of components, and part of the reason for that is, I mean, at this point in time, it's about looking at these. It's basically going to be around all aspects of transport, and it's at this stage they're saying it could be up to 6 components, but we don't really know because it's not well thought through enough. And in fairness to the Minister, we haven't really had a chance to look through the legislative programme before year one. But I mean, some of the aspects of it would be obviously railroad. You know, that we talked about there's earlier work going on in the ports, but nevertheless there'll be aspects about joining everything up. There's a bigger transport plan that's being developed at the moment, and that is looking at all aspects of transport, and that will definitely feed into this as well, because you'll want to see, there'll be things like how do we achieve greater use of public transport, how do we move people out of off the road as far as possible, and how do we move towards lower. I know there'll be a separate decarbonisation bill, but again, some of those issues are bound to come into this as well. So I know we said 6, which is quite hopeful for us as officials that we can organise it that well, but I don't think we're at that stage yet where we could sort of list out here's what the bill will look like.
I'm sorry, Mark, just if we could get some information to the committee on those, as soon as we can, within, obviously.
And it will be only headings at this
Yeah.
stage, because as Dennis has said, I haven't even signed off on the principles
Yeah.
of
This
these.
is year 3,
Yeah.
so it's
Yeah.
very much, in fairness, we put this down here, and I mean, it's helpful to have the marker, but it's just
Yeah.
a marker.
Mark, do you have any questions on MOT? Yeah.
Carried away.
Any question there, MOT, Mark?
No, that's okay.
Patrick?
Thanks, Chair. Minister, just in relation to the announcements that came out on Monday, both from yourself and a bit earlier in the press, in terms of that move to a 10-day or extending the 5-day window to get an emergency test out to 10 days, is that enacted as of now, or when will that be? So that is live
It's
now,
immediately
that
enacted,
change has been
yes.
made. Okay, great. Just wanted to confirm that, 'cause I had a couple of questions about it. And you have said that you're going to look at the exemption certificates similar to the system that we had during COVID. Could I ask where that is within the system? What's the process looking like? When we're likely to see that rolled out?
Well, a decision on it will be made, and I said in the Assembly on Monday that I'll make an announcement to that, most likely through a ministerial statement to the Assembly after Easter. The current legislation allows me to do it for 6 months in exceptional circumstances, and obviously COVID was exceptional circumstances, and you were able to roll it forward for a year, and you probably want to do it for a year, because if you do it for 6 months, you then have a middle of the year a significant number of increases in your demand for MOT tests. So I'm looking at the legislation to see how I most effectively use it to assist motorists in the time ahead.
Great, and just one follow-up question, similar to what John was saying about moving to either biennial or based on mileage of the vehicle. So say every time it gets to 20,000 miles, they have to come in and do a test. I've been asked why that hasn't maybe featured prominently. Am I right in thinking maybe it would interrupt the planning within MOT test centres, because they wouldn't necessarily have as good a gauge on the amount of cars that are likely to be coming through, because obviously in terms of age we're able to base that based on the registration of the vehicle, but you don't know when someone's going to clock up 20,000 miles. Would that be the main issue with that?
That's exactly it. It's what data and information DVA holds. We hold the age of vehicles, who owns the vehicles, registration, etc., but not the mileage they're doing.
So that could create a lot of issues if people run that mileage a lot more quickly than we would expect them to.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, members, for that. I do want to try and move on now to other issues, but just lastly on the MOT centres, obviously we've seen rises of the MOT pricing. Are MOT centres self-sufficient in that way financially? You know, are MOT centres making money for the department? Is there a shortfall there? Can you detail any of that?
The way the DVA is set up, it is set up as a fund which has to be self-sufficient. It's not a major income driver for the department, and we can give you the financial statistics in terms of the department the DVA in writing, but we're not rolling it in, I can assure you. Okay. The increases were brought about as I think the last time MOT costs went up was it 2009?
5, I think.
5? That's 9 years ago.
Yeah.
There's very, very little in life that hasn't rose in cost, and it's still very, very good value for money. You know,
18
years ago.
19
sorry,
years ago.
Here, that shows the old line. You should have told me that. I have to look at that again.
I'll not tell you where I was. That's it.
I was in one of these rooms.
Well, look, if you could provide us that in writing, that would be great. So, I want to move on to Northern Ireland Water, so water and treatment. Then we'll move on to roads and planning, and we'll look at flooding. So, if we take Northern Ireland Water first. Northern Ireland Water have said that their need is about 1.9 billion. The utility regulator is currently looking at that figure, and I understand it's coming back later this month in relation to that. I would hazard a guess it's going to be up in cost. So
Probably later. Sorry, Chair.
Okay.
Just to say, I think that we've only spoken recently to the utility regulator, and it's probably now looking at near the summer before they'll be able to come back with a full.
Okay. So we have had correspondence back. We had Sarah Venning, the Chief Executive, at the committee. I'm sure you're aware of that. We had correspondence back which said with the shortfall that they're looking at of around 900 million, it looks like 19,000 proposed homes are going to be unlikely to be built. There'll be 55 commercial developments unlikely to progress. And that will obviously have an impact upon employment in sectors and indeed some of our own public buildings as well. So what discussions are currently going on at the minute with the Finance Department to look at this issue? Because what was also very clear in that committee evidence session was the fact of the overspills into our waterways, and that is at a very critical situation. And in fact, Northern Ireland Water don't know how many overspills overall there are in terms of Northern Ireland into our waterways. So this is a really, really critical piece of infrastructure in Northern Ireland, which has environmental and socio-economic implications to it. So what discussions are currently going on whilst we await the utility regulator coming back, and in terms of your budgets?
There's regular engagement between my department and NI Water around their financial asks and plans going into the future. And I'm now currently involved, as all departments are, involved in engagements with the Department of Finance around next year's budget. And the capital forecast for next year's budget is not good. It appears to be reduced even from previous years. So I'm competing with all other departments in that regard. And within my own department, I have competing demands for capital as well. But so you've mentioned that the utility regulator is currently reviewing the expenditure plan by NI Water and will report back around April time, or when I get the report. And I'll study that with great careful consideration. But then the reality hits. I will have a certain amount of money at that stage, which I have to allocate to all the aspects of my department that require capital, and I have NI Water. I am meeting NI Water later this afternoon, and obviously when I was at this post previously, I had a number of discussions with them. I'll continue the discussions around that. NI Water have ambitious plans, which I welcome. They're an ambitious, forward-looking organisation, but I have to measure that against what I can deliver for them. In terms of economically constrained areas, it's a term I've said on record I don't like. I think what needs to happen is that we need to have, and in fairness, NI Water called for this, early engagement between developers and NI Water about what is possible and what other solutions there may be available to developers for certain sites across the north, whether they be commercial or housing. We have, and when I was previously in post, myself and the then Minister for Communities, Deirdre Hargey, established meetings between NI Water and the various social housing providers to discuss how each organisation works and what timeframes they work with. And those conversations have been very useful and have proved beneficial even in that planning programme, and I would encourage that across the board.
Could you detail where we're at with the pre-action protocol with Northern Ireland Water and the department, and also could lessons be learned review be shared with the committee as well?
I'm going to ask Dennis to come in on that.
Yes, very, very happy to share the outcome of that report. What I would say is it's probably just worth giving a wee bit of background to it, in that, and I know Northern Ireland Water colleagues had mentioned the fact that, as they put it, there was a reduction during the year. Actually, there was an amount that had been allocated to Northern Ireland Water at the start of the year, 321 million. And during the course of the year, then there had been an additional amount factored in by Northern Ireland Water to spend over and above the allocation. So when we got to the end of the year, hopefully the board of Northern Ireland Water decided that they would not overspend or spend that additional 30 million that we didn't have. And as a result of that, we decided that it would be a good idea for us to have a lessons learned for the whole department as to, for the department and for NI Water, so that we could understand just how we got to that place, because it was quite late in the year, really, to get to that point where we were able to be assured that we were going to live within our budget. Well, we weren't going to live within our budget overall, but we were going to live within that aspect of our budget. So the idea of the review is it will come to us. We will definitely write to you, give you the outcome of that, the lessons learned. The one caveat I would say about that is I don't know what it's going to involve, and I want to make sure that before obviously the Minister will need to see it. Before we send that to you, we'll just need to look at it, because obviously, for example, I want the report will be looking at everybody's role in that, including mine. So I want to make sure that what we send you is appropriate.
Okay, and I know that the First Minister ruled out water charges, and quite a large 70% or so odd of Northern Ireland's funds are public money. So, you're the Minister for Infrastructure. Have you ruled out water charges?
I've ruled out domestic water charges, which will be an added burden onto already hard-pressed families. My argument is that our water service is going to have to be funded through general taxation and through the block grant. As the Assembly and the executive parties have all agreed, we are currently underfunded, and I think has been agreed by the British government that this society is underfunded. We need proper resources to run our public services, but I don't think adding further burdens onto hard-pressed working families is the way forward.
Okay, we'll move to members. Deputy Chair.
Yeah, thanks, Minister. I don't think anyone here envies the difficult decisions you have in trying to triage these massive capital projects and the spends associated, and Northern Ireland Water is probably one of the biggest in terms of the relationship you have with the department. The Chair's already outlined the pressures that the Chief Executive highlighted to us. Is there an option, or have you looked at the option around a different funding model for Northern Ireland Water, and is that something that could be teased out, their ability to borrow more to invest in future infrastructure, potential for mutualisation, for example? Should everything, as I believe, be on the table in terms of opening up funding streams for Northern Ireland Water so they can invest in infrastructure in the future?
Unless there's a new idea contained in the mutualisation programme, which I haven't yet come across, my understanding is that if you go down the mutualisation route, that it leads directly to domestic water charges to the homeowner or whoever may be in the premises. That's my understanding of where mutualisation will lead us. So unless there's a new caveat or understanding of how mutualisation works, then I don't think that is the way forward. NI Water has faced significant increase in its costs, which is a heavy energy provider or user, so massive increases there. Obviously, in terms of its capital and its construction costs have risen dramatically as well. So all these things have risen, even from the original water price control was introduced. And we as a department have been trying to respond to that. NI Water has been trying to respond to that. But I haven't come across a funding model yet that will give it the sustainability. If we were allowed to borrow more, it has to borrow against its assets. Mm-hmm. Those assets come back to us. So that is a liability against my department and the executive and the entire finances of this place. So we have to be very careful in that regard as well. They can't borrow against anything else as far as I can understand other than their assets. So we have to be careful how we go down that route as well.
I think obviously sorry.
So I was just going to say it might be worth adding, Minister, on the back of that, just not to get into the debate about it, but there's £4 billion worth of assets in Northern Ireland Water and £2.8 billion of liabilities. So part of that is equity owned by the department and debt as well. So it's just to say, just give a sense of the scale of the challenge there, whatever model is used.
Absolutely. No, there are no easy decisions here, but the reality is, as you've heard, has been borne out, and because of the underinvestment year on year, that those pressures get worse. And I take what you've said about early engagement with developers, and there are examples around the country where that is happening, but we've heard of this developer-led model, which invariably leads to homeowner paid, because any anecdotal evidence we see is that house prices are going up as a result of sewage level being added to the houses. and often social housing projects just don't happen because they're being done often with tight budgets. So that's why there are 19,000 proposed homes unlikely to be built in a Caffrey College and special needs schools. So I take the point, and it's an option that needs to be looked at, but at the same time it's not often viable, or the public are ultimately paying for it indirectly, which we see with increased mortgage prices.
Well, members will understand that we're currently in a bidding round, both publicly and privately, around budgets. And each government-owned company or arm's length body that I'll encounter will tell me the worst case scenario. And we're in certainly we are in a budgetary time where a lot of those worst case scenarios are reality. But I, as Minister, and my officials have to drill down into that to see exactly what can be done. And I also will be asking the question, what can we do differently? And I know the members bringing forward a debate in a few weeks' time around how we could do things differently. I welcome that. We have to look at all those things and just be minded that we don't introduce inadvertently domestic water charges. But there's a challenge, and I think NI Water's up for this challenge. There's a challenge there for NI Water as well, how we do things differently as well.
Okay, thanks, Minister. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Keith?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Must I have one question with respect to discharges and combined flow discharges and breaches, etc. Obviously, we've seen the shocking scenes last year on Lough Neagh, and people are saying, and different scientists are saying, that this can't come back. My understanding is from modelling, and it's modelling only, that NI Water is contributing by 24% to that. Are you content with that figure? Are you content that NI Water have got a grasp of the issue that they're causing to the Lough?
Well, I'm not content with that figure or the state of our loch. It's quite clearly an environmental disaster, and we have to do, including my department, have to do things within our power to start rectifying that. As you know, it is a result of perhaps 60 years of mismanagement of a whole range of aspects of our environment and our society, which has resulted in a build-up of nutrients in the loch. DAERA are taking the lead on responding to the crisis in the loch. I have assured the DAERA Minister that I do everything within my power to assist him and his department in that work. I'm acutely conscious that when I'm looking at NI Water's budget and how I support them, that we don't exacerbate the issue around the loch or any other water course that we have. But I'm having to deal with a very constrained budget at the moment. Part of my discussions with NI Water will be how we ensure or how we assist in reducing the nutrient flow into the loch going into the future.
Okay, just one final point, Chair. So maybe I suppose to get an understanding, I guess maybe we need to look at it as a committee to get an understanding how big or what the issue is with NI Water and what combined discharge point it is, how many overflow times they have into the loch. So I have asked some questions privately, but I think it's maybe a thing we need to look at to get an understanding of that, because that issue is not going to go away anytime soon. And I appreciate, as the Minister said, it's not going to go away overnight. But I think we need to get an understanding how much NI Water is contributing to that issue. Yep. Thank you.
Okay. Cahill?
No, sorry, Chair. I'll wait to the planning section because it marries up with the.
Okay.
This section of the conversation marries up with the planning section, so I'll wait.
Okay, members content then to move on. So we'll move to flooding. Now, obviously, again, we're looking at budgets and how will you ensure that schemes will be delivered and will operate within your constrained budget, and how are you going to prioritise? Because, again, last week some officials said about some of the defences that are in place need to go back to them again. I think it was around 70% in total of coastal and the fluvial defences that aren't working as they should be. So we're going to have to go back to those, but there's also going to need to be more new flood defences put in place elsewhere. So how do we prioritise that, against your capital budget?
Again, it goes to engagement with obviously my own officials and with the Department of Finance and the Executive as to how we support each other in protecting communities against the increased risk of flooding as we move forward. We all remember the scenes from October in Downpatrick, Newry and my own constituency of Portadown. That was the wettest October in 135 years. And I have been in this post off and on. I spent 6 months in it in 2022. I'm back in it again in 2022. There was significant flooding as a result of torrential downpour. There was an August flood. And I have no doubt, as I'm sure as I'm sitting here, that we'll witness similar scenes through possibly the spring or into the summer as well, because our climate is changing. So I will do my best to support flood prevention schemes, and there's a number of planned. We have to gain. It's another way of how we look at these things, and when we intervene, when we put these measures in place. One, and we're going to come on to planning. We have to ensure that our planning policies are correct and that we're not building in areas which are likely to flooding. Or if we are building, we're building in a way which recognises the fact that an area is going to flood. We want to ensure that we're using our resources. Like for instance, we could use greenways and flooding defences in one course. So can we be imaginative around where we introduce greenways and how we landscape those for flood prevention, how we use the natural environment. And there is an interesting programme of work going in relation to living with water, which my department's involved in, initially in around Belfast, but also Derry, which looks at how we deal with particularly rainwater and flow from hard stand surfaces. I think it is a very interesting project and going away, but we're also going to have to introduce hard build material to hold back either the sea or to hold back flood waters coming from rivers, etc. as well. It all costs money. We don't have the budget to cover it all, but we can do some things. And throughout this debate, and understandably, we will examine the pressures on my budget and the pressures on my department, but I don't want to send out the message that we're not doing anything. There is things we can do, and there is things we will be doing in a number of areas. And if you go to Newcastle, you look at the flood defences that were introduced in Newcastle, excellent programme of work was done there. We can do that elsewhere where it suits. So money and initiative and time, all those things combined, and we can get things done.
Thank you. I'll not even go into Fermanagh and South Tyrone and the amount of rain that we get. But anyway, I'm going to move to members. So, Deputy Chair.
You on flooding still?
Yes, we're on flooding.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Minister, I don't want to get into specific areas, but I suppose the nature of it, as you've already alluded to, with the rising tides and the amount of rain that we're seeing every year, I genuinely believe it's almost too much and unfair of a burden to put it all on the Department of Infrastructure. This needs to be totally cross-cutting. DERA has a role, yourselves have a role, local government has a role. There needs to be change in planning. There's so much, and the Department of Economy also has a role as well, because we've heard in terms of the rollout of support for businesses affected, Department of Communities for those affected by houses. So there almost needs to be a cross-cutting, cross-departmental fund and plan. Well, that's my belief, and you're nodding away, so I think you agree in that. And also, I made the point on the adjournment debate for South Down. It's not an area I represent, but it could equally have been East Antrim or Mid-Ulster or anywhere else in the country. There almost needs to be, in my mind as well, an automated scheme that kicks in terms of supporting, both financially and logistically, those people affected as this phenomenon does get worse. I'm just interested to hear your thoughts on how that could be done, and do you agree?
I would welcome across our executive strategy in relation to how we deal with flooding, or more importantly probably how we live with water. In that regard. It is cross-departmental, it's cross-societal, everything. The more hard surfaces we have, the more landscaping we remove, the more concrete and tarmac we pour, the more water runs quickly. The faster it runs, the more flooding you get. The system hasn't an opportunity to let it soak away. And it's quite clear from climate reports that we are going to get heavier and heavier downpours of rain. And we have to have facilities in place to do that. So I'm certainly, when I'm looking at planning matters, I'm engaged around how we live and deal with water. I'm very keen in terms of environmental projects around it. if anybody knows Craigavon and knows Craigavon Lakes, which were built 50 years ago, they were built to take off the access water runway of that new city. And that was imaginative 50 years ago. We should be doing more of that. You know, we should be looking at areas where we can hold large-scale sections of water and release them slowly back into the drainage system. They have a huge environmental benefit, for even a biodiversity benefit, and it allows us also even to look at that greenway function, where we can put barriers in, but they're also used for active travel as well. So there's a lot of things you can do in relation to challenging or to dealing with the challenges that climate change is going to bring to us, rather than simply building concrete walls, though sometimes concrete walls are necessary.
That's something they're needed at Thames Chair, and I totally agree, Minister. And I know we're going to come to planning, but it does tease into it, because we're at a stage where a lot of councils are either finished their local development plans or in the process of it, but I don't see a lot of evidence that ideas like new lakes or new greenways or all that thinking in terms of where we're planning to build the houses once Northern Ireland Water's got the capacity is going to be there, and you know that's quite frustrating looking forward. So I think it's something we do need to tease out and how we deal with that.
Thank you. Patrick?
Thank you, Chair. I've got a few questions on this, and the Minister will know that I've put in a number of questions in relation to the flooding, particularly in the Downpatrick area in the past. We know that there is the review ongoing that's being coordinated through the Executive Office, but an awful lot of the response will fall to your department. I think that the indication is that would be completed by sort of June time. I'm keen to know if that will be completed in time to properly inform your budgetary ask to actually carry out the works necessary to prevent against flooding incidents similar to what we saw last year in places like Downpatrick, Newry and Newcastle.
I don't think it'll be completed in that time, but I'll caveat that with this, right? The issues which pertain to those areas won't be resolved in this financial year. But in terms of physical hard stand flood prevention measures, lessons will be learnt in terms of how the various agencies responded to the flooding incident, and what we can do better. Though it has to be said, if you look at, for instance, road service staffing, we have lost significant numbers of road service staff over the years for a variety of reasons. Those staff often respond to the flooding incidents. They're often the first people on the ground, along with the other emergency services and other agencies. And they dealt particularly well with the flooding incident in October. But if Storm Ciarán had hit us 2 days later, we would have been in serious difficulties. Serious difficulties, because we wouldn't have had the personnel to respond to it. So that's how tight things are at times in relation to our flood responses. But in terms of measures to protect Newcastle and Downpatrick and Newry, there is work commissioned to look at that. But that given the engineering complexities to a lot of that work, it takes several years to get to the point where you're satisfied that the engineering plan you have is the right one for it, and then you have to match that against the capital available at that time. But I've just the Permanent Secretary just gave me a figure there. Last year we spent £22.7 million of capital in relation to tackling flooding and supporting communities. So there is, now I would like to be able to spend twice that, but there is investment going in. Communities are beginning to see a difference when there is major flooding episodes. And I know part of Newry was hit, but there was another part of Newry that wasn't hit as a direct result of work that was done. Residents in Newcastle living along the Shimna River, who would have feared such episodes, now are being able to be protected by the wall that's built there. We want to get to that position in all towns. But some of them are very complicated engineering proposals, and you have to be careful that if you might be solving a problem in this area and creating a worse problem down there.
And that's I was going to raise that in relation to Newcastle, and there has been some fear that the current flood alleviation structure, which has worked exceptionally well in that part along Bryansford Road and so on, has displaced or pushed flooding incidents into other areas like the Marguerite part of Newcastle. Certainly the issue we saw in Downpatrick was that everything just pooled into the town centre. There were other residential areas that were just about spared, roads and gardens and so on flooded. flooded, but there is no residential damage. But I'll not name the area, but there is a particular area like that where there is a new development currently ongoing, where there will be houses built 4 feet above ground level, which they have full planning permission to do. Now, that area that they're building in was a floodplain, or not a formally designated one, but it essentially became a de facto floodplain during the most recent floods and was a major reason why properties didn't flood. And I've had a number of residents that live around that area come to me incredibly concerned that the next bout of flooding will result in their houses being underwater. And I suppose that the reason I ask is, in terms of the planning system, what guidance you plan to give out, particularly in the short term, for future developments where there has been identified flooding risk, to try and deal with that and make sure it doesn't happen. It may be too late for this development. I have raised it with the planning authority, but in terms of guidance that could come from the department, I think that's something that needs to give consideration to in the short term.
Well, that type of development, as you know, is a council matter, but all councils are provided with up-to-date flood maps, and indeed maps projecting where flooding will be in X amount of years as the climate changes. So that there is very comprehensive flooding maps available and presented to planning committees. And I've said this previously, I would urge anyone involved in the planning process to take due diligence in relation to approving a planning application where there's concerns about flooding, because we used to talk about once in 100 years. That's reducing all the time. And I would be of the view, if you're getting a warning that flooding is going to take place somewhere, it is going to take place probably in your lifetime. So it is, and if you're prepared to approve a planning application on a site where you have concerns about flooding, there's no point standing 10 years from now handing the residents a sandbag and saying, I'm sorry about this, if you're responsible for giving planning permission for it.
And final question, Chair, and the Minister's comments are apt, because we know in Downpatrick right now we are only a few days of heavy rain away from another flooding incident. Hopefully, coming into the warmer months, we won't see a repeat of what we saw in Halloween, but what we're hearing from yourself is that those capital investments required to upgrade flood defences will take several years, and that's understandable. There are short-term measures that need to be taken in terms of emergency response. There wasn't a single business in Downpatrick that was told that they were likely to flood, so clearly there is a massive gap there in terms of communication. And I do have to say, whilst road service in particular on the ground were fantastic in communicating with local reps, largely because we've built up those relationships with them, there wasn't a lot coming from Rivers. They weren't really proactively engaging with local representatives on the ground who were actually the coal face of dealing with businesses. So I think that does need to be looked at from a departmental perspective. And to be fair, the council did do their best to try and manage those relationships, but it was clear that there wasn't an organised structure in place to deal with events like this. I'm going to come back to the live flooding risk in Downpatrick, and everyone I speak to raises with me the issue of the Coyle River and the fact that it is choked almost to the top of the water level with toxic sludge and silt and branches and everything that's built up over years of mismanagement and neglect. And every time I raise this with the department, I get back the response that dredging couldn't possibly help. Now, I'm not a rivers engineer, but logic would surely dictate that through dredging and increasing capacity in a river, you increase the amount of capacity through which potential floodwater could sit and avoid going into a town. I wanted to get the Minister's opinion on this, because I do feel that it is a matter of cost pressures why dredging hasn't been carried out, rather than whether that solution would actually work and help to alleviate flood risk.
I'm not a flooding engineer either, but I have spent a lot of time in my department days with flood engineers who are, I have to say, are dedicated to their task and to their job. I will raise the issue with them again. I will put this footnote to it too. One of the things I have learned is this: if you dredge a river, it could flow quicker, which can actually cause more significant problems. So that may be a concern of our engineers, but I will raise it with them again and ask them to look at it as a matter of urgency to see if there is a dredging solution to that issue.
Just a quick supplementary. Sometimes it's come back that we're asking for the entire river to be dredged, and we fully appreciate that that's not financially viable or probably environmentally viable. It's targeted dredging in key choke points around the Coyle Basin that we're asking for in those key areas that we know were problematic last time around. And if it's a matter of cost, Minister, you'll tell us that, and we'll try and go to bat to do what we can politically to get the resources for that. But I want an answer on whether it could potentially help with flooding risk.
Okay, I'll follow that up.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We're going to move to Keith, please.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. And Patrick would have first covered sort of both my points very similarly, but I'll touch on them briefly. One is the River Blackwater, and Patrick touched on dredging, etc., and the restriction of flow of water. And I appreciate the Blackwater not directly causes flooding, floods farmland, which is understandable. However, there's an issue there of the navigation thing, and one of your officials a week ago mentioned that Rivers Agency is concerned with flooding and not necessarily navigation. However, there's an argument there that does need opened up. The Blackwater let the water away quicker, theoretically. I appreciate the Minister's point into the lock. So we bit of commentary on that. And then secondly, the flooding issue, obviously you're a consultee from planning, and you talked about this from a council point of view. Where councils ask you your opinion on flooding, and you obviously advise them on the mapping, whether it be the floodplain or climate floodplain, as I call it. Can you change that legislation that the council have to take your engineers' information on board? Because I see it sometimes, depending where the planning is, councillors can take one view or the other. So effectively, there's times they listen to the advice and there's times they don't. Is any form of legislation you can put through that they have to follow that advice? So River Blackwater, and then broadly the flooding stroke planning advice. Thanks.
I'm very familiar with the River Blackwater issue, and it has been exacerbated in recent weeks by someone who has cut a considerable amount of trees down along that river and allowed them to flow down towards the mouth with the ban, and has caused huge disruption, both and damage to the environment, and also a disruption to local people involved in the fishing industry and those who do pleasure cruises along the loch. I had suggested previously that both Mid-Ulster Council and ABC Council engage with the department about a possible bid for the Blue Greenway Fund, and I would encourage the councils to return to that matter. My department doesn't have any legislative basis for dredging the mouth of the River Blackwater. We do have responsibility for a number of channels in relation to Lough Neagh and stops or small ports or harbours for the fishing boats, but not the River Blackwater. But we need to be imaginative about this. I do have funding available to me under the Blue Greenway funding. I can't predict the outcome of an application, but I think if an application came in to open up the mouth of the River Blackwater, it certainly would meet the criteria, and then would have to be assessed against all the other aspects of that. You then get into, and I know there is concerns from councils about who has responsibility for dumping the materials that are dredged out of the loch or out of the river basin. What does that cost? Who's the licence to move it? I know previously farmers used to spread it on their land. I don't think that's possible anymore. So there is a number of complications to it, but I would encourage the councils to return to the Blue Greenway Fund and see what we can do there.
Okay, Keith, are you content?
Just Minister,
sorry, the flooding issues. Sorry, Keith. Yes,
okay.
The legislation. All legislation can be changed or amended. I have no immediate plans to change the planning legislation. There is some planning legislation in the future work programmes. If we do feel that we have to be more stringent in terms of legislation around the taking on board departmental advice or Rivers Agency's advice in relation to flooding, then we will do so.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Mark?
Thank you, Chair, and thanks, Minister. It doesn't rain, but it pours. In terms of the flood alleviation scheme, you're quite right to identify that different locations have completely different circumstances and therefore will require completely different solutions when it comes to flooding, and there's some areas a lot more complex than others. think there's a fear, and so a few others have got a bit parochial, so forgive me if I do as well, in areas in my constituency, be it Drumahoe and Eglinton. While there's huge sympathy when you see other areas being flooded, there's also a fear, and it's not a selfish one, that they'll be pushed further down the priority list while they patiently wait for their long proposed and promised schemes. I just don't know, and maybe you don't have it there offhand, Minister, where they are in terms of priority or funding. On the planning issue, I think in terms of PPS 15, as it was, it deals with flood risk, it was looked at with envy from other jurisdictions as actually being more stringent on planning in flood areas. But then I was wondering, you mentioned the legislation, Minister, at the start you'd mentioned a water, flooding and drainage bill. It's on the legislative programme. I was just wondering, what is the intent and content of that proposed legislation?
The full detail of that legislation has not been drafted yet, Mark, and it will it has the potential to take into account a number of the concerns that have been raised here today around those issues, but it is trying to keep up to date as possible legislatively in terms of our responsibilities around all those issues. From memory, Eglinton in itself, it's not a case of being pushed up or down the priority list, it's where various schemes are in terms of an engineering resolution. And I think that's where Eglinton is. It's a very complex problem, and it's one of those issues where you may solve the problem there and create a huger, more significant problem further down the road. I visited Eglinton the last time it flooded. I also think I was in Drumnahoe, and if memory serves me right, the day I arrived, the flooding had taken place the day before, and there was a lovely tranquil stream bobbling through the side the estate. And it was a lovely summer's day, and it looked lovely. The day before, that stream had been pouring through people's houses. So that's how quickly it can happen. And I don't know what the planning conditions were in that area, but with the benefit of hindsight, you would say to yourself, was it the best idea to build properties there? But as I say, I don't know what the planning conditions were at the time.
They're better now than they were, I think, is the point. And then in terms of the point Keith had made around the Blackwater, or you'd made regarding issues there around the trees being cut down, who takes responsibility for that then? Is that your department through Rivers? Is it NIEA? Or
I would suspect it's NIEA.
Has an offence been committed necessarily?
And the question is, has an offence been?
If you pardon the expression.
Has an offence been committed is the question. But in my opinion, it would be NIEA. They appear to have been cut off the riverbanks further upstream and cut in a way which allowed them to then fall into the river and float downstream. And I don't know if an offence has been committed, so just to be clear about that, but certainly it's offensive. There is.
One of the problems I think that it's suspected of contributing to flooding, then, and it is around responsibility, and you have designated parts of the river and undesignated, and who's responsible for maintenance. And things like that when a river flows, and I don't think the time.
When it comes to the operational side of it, obviously the rivers people will want to make sure that any blockages are removed as soon as possible. That is absolutely part of their role. So there's no, it's not so much of a question about that, but the point about the legislative responsibility and the enforcement issue is a different matter, I think.
Because it's much wider than just that river. You know? Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to go to Peter now.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you, Dennis, as well. It's good to see you again. My point's really on, I think it's been touched upon loosely in terms of climate change and the fact that there's going to be increased rainfall in the coming years. And I've raised a number of times, certainly I've raised it with you in writing, Dennis, about a more advanced flood warning system. I think we're lagging behind GB in terms of that, and I raised it last week with officials as well. So really it was just to see, is that something that's being scoped out to? I think I'd raised, Dennis, with you about maybe potentially working with the Department of Finance to try to get access to increased funds or something, because with that advanced flood warning system, it's been raised with me that it would really be beneficial for people if there is a flood coming at some point.
It's being scoped out, and we are falling behind across these islands in terms of flood warning systems, and Patrick had referred to what happened in Downpatrick. Now, sometimes it's very difficult to predict where flooding is going to occur and where the major rainfall is going to be. But it is a system that we're looking at. It's several £1 million worth of investment required for it. I don't have the funding for it currently, but I do hope to have in the future some funding to introduce such a system.
Just to add to what the Minister was saying, that there will obviously be bids going in as part of the process, and I mean, in addition to the expenditure that the Minister referred to, the capital expenditure, we're looking for more this year, and you know, I think we've talked about the scale of it before, but some of that will be revenue as well. So yes, very actively looking at it.
Be positive to hear. Thanks very much.
Subject to us getting the budget. I should always before I get too positive. But that, yes.
Yeah, you take the positivity out of that.
I know it's ambitious in terms of cost, but I just think it'd be really necessary.
Yeah.
That's great that it's on your radar. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, and hello to I see a school has just joined us there, so you're very welcome to the committee. But Minister, we're just going to move on because we've two final areas, I suppose, that we want to look at, and I know the time is getting the better of us. So I suppose if we touch on planning, because that has come up just in the course of the conversation. We did obviously have our debate in the Chamber in relation to planning, but I suppose we've had reports, we've had reviews, we've had the Northern Ireland Audit Office report, we've had the Public Account Committee, which indicated that the planning system is not delivering for people or the economy. So when can the committee expect to see the memorandum of reply in respect of the Public Accounts Committee report on planning? And that was referenced in your first day brief. So when can we expect to see that?
I'm working on it, or my officials are working on it to respond. The Audit Office report was quite complex and detailed, so it deserves a complex and detailed response. Though we have taken some interim actions, as you'll be aware, we have introduced the Planning Improvement Performance Agenda. We have brought in the Interim Commission. There is better engagement than there ever has been between the various agencies involved in our planning process. It's too early to tell whether we are seeing significant improvements in that, but the latest figures available to me show that across the board, the most recent published statistics for the first 6 months of 23-24 show that the average processing time for local applications was 19.2 weeks across all councils, against a target of 15 weeks, with 4 of the 11 councils meeting the 15-week target. The average processing time for applications during the period was For major applications during this period was 34.7 weeks across all councils. This represents a decrease of over 15 weeks compared with the same period a year earlier, moving closer to the 30-week target. Results for the 70% target for closure of enforcement cases in 30 weeks are not available at this time now. One swallow doesn't make a summer, but those figures are encouraging, and I do welcome the fact that they're under the Planning Improvement Programme and under the Interim Commission. We are seeing closer working among the various organisations responsible for planning than we've ever seen.
And I know it's been referenced there by members just in relation to the flooding issue, but council's local development plans, that is a serious issue. And where is the accountability in relation to making sure that councils have that in place? Because that's quite fundamental, I suppose, in relation to some of the planning and councils. So what's being done in relation to that? Do they need more resource? But I mean, that is a detrimental impact upon planning.
First line of accountability is the local councillors who sit on those councils to make sure that they're engaging fully with the officials, and the officials are moving forward at a pace which meets the needs. My department at a strategic level doesn't engage with the councils around this. We have set out guidance. There's no statutory deadlines in this, I think, other than the advertisement of the programmes in the media, except there's no actual other statutory guidance in the programme. But my department is working closely with them. One of the areas of concern is whether the Planning Appeals Commission has the resources to deal with the plans that are coming before them. I suspect not, but they're not. The Planning Appeals Commission doesn't fall under my department. I suspect, like every other public service, they are under-resourced, understaffed. But that's a question for the Justice Department. It's something the committee may want to take up in a joint meeting or something with the Justice Committee, but it falls outside my remit.
Thank you. Members, remember time, so please come to your questions, and if we can try and keep contributions as short as possible. So I'm going to move to the Deputy Chair.
Thanks, Chair. I'll try and be brief. I'll start with PAC because you raised it. I know it's not under your purview, Minister. It probably should be, given where it is, and it's been described by many in the industry as everyone's friend and no one's family in terms of the work it does, autonomy without accountability, and I think it needs to have that. It needs to be properly funded, and given the way planning is going, it's probably going to be even more stretched because of the amount of cases that are going to it, and you only have to look at the amount of time it's taken for applications, significant ones, going through the Planning Appeals Commission. So interested to hear what you think about that, and how we could tackle that. I know it's not.
Yeah, I maybe have to be careful because I have a role in planning. I have to sign off on some strategic planning process, so I have to be careful. There has to be an independence, but I do believe there has to be accountability.
Exactly.
You know, we're elected representatives who are tasked with representing the public and looking after public interests in finance. So there has to be some accountability mechanism within that. I'm open to ideas and suggestions on it. I think it'll have to be a wider executive discussion around it, and obviously whatever committees have to be involved in that. But we are seeing delays as a result of the pressures the PAC is under, and we have to find some way of unblocking that.
And then to move to your councils, because you touched on that, I mean, we're heading towards decades since planning was devolved down under RPA, and there are some council areas that are best in class and others that could definitely be doing better. I have a concern that clearly there's an underfunding and support in terms of the training and ability of some of the councils and council members. Some are doing incredibly well, but others seem to be falling by the wayside. And I'm just wondering, is there more that could be done, do you think, from the department to scrutinise that and to provide additional support, or should that be provided in-house by the local councils? I just think I went to Peterborough in 2014 when I was on that committee, and the difference in levels and understanding about what were and were not material planning considerations were chalk and cheese compared to some of the contributions I hear. Others are doing fantastically well, but it's not clearly a level playing field, and there's a postcode lottery in terms of the ability of some of those committees.
I have to declare an interest, as my wife is a member of ABC Planning Committee. The resourcing of the planning committees is a matter for the council. No comment.
Yes, it is, Mark.
You put me off a chain of thought there. See if I've got in trouble at home or not. The first, in terms of finance, that's a matter for the councils, and you know, and how councils resource their various elements is a matter for the councils. I think in terms of the oversight of the department, we have a certain oversight in that, and we will support in any way we can. But I come back to the planning improvement programme we've put in place, and the interim planning commission. I do think we're beginning to see a chink of light at the end of the tunnel on some of this stuff. I'm not overly keen on more reviews or more reform, because the system almost stalls while that's going on. I think we have enough evidence gathered to know what the issues are. We know what some of the solutions are. Some of them are resource based, either from my department or from local councils, and other of them is just introducing best practice across the board.
I think that's what came to light, Chair, in the debate. There's plenty of reports and reviews out there that the departments and others have conducted, so it's just about now implementing them. But I've got 10 others, but I'll not do it today. I'm conscious of time.
Ministerial questions could be flooded. Peter McReynolds.
Thank you, Chair. I think planning is going to be a really important issue. I think since restoration, it was the second motion I think the Chair put that forward, so it's really important that we get that right. So a couple of questions here. You mentioned the Interim Regional Planning Commission. Can you tell me a little about what that work has been to date that they've done, and maybe what they've achieved since coming into be?
Okay, have you the detail?
I've got some information on that. I mean, I suppose sorry, while I'm finding that. The Interim Regional Planning Commission has looked at the whole, if you're happy enough, Minister, maybe start off. So it's looked at a whole range of issues right across the piece, and it's had a lot of input. I suppose there's two elements to it which have been very helpful. One is having the sort of industry type organisations on it, business organisations who can give you a very clear view as to what's going well and what's not going so well. Secondly, they've looked at the wider system as a whole, and in fact we've had a couple of workshops with them. I'm just trying to find my actual notes here in terms of the detail of that. But some of the issues that have come out of that would be really around, and we've kind of touched on it already. There's an issue about, on the one hand, you need to have clear governance and accountability in order to understand what's happening at each level in the system. And there is individual responsibility, so the councils have their own responsibilities and the department is separate from that. But the bigger issue is it working together as a system? And how do you get that balance? Because on the one hand, they were split for a reason, but on the other hand, if we just work as separate entities and not really talking to each other, it's not going to deliver. So a big piece of this is around about how do you build a more collaborative culture within that, and that's where the Commission has come to. So there's a lot of different elements that they've input to. They've input around things like, for example, there's the IT system, the actual planning portal, which I know, again, will be one of those things that doesn't necessarily get universal thanks, because it's not necessarily always delivering exactly the way people want it to. But when you look at other projects and you look at some of the IT projects around government, it's an amazing achievement and I can say that because I wasn't here when it was done, to get that up and running and get it to the point where we're now starting to be able to collect the data to really understand how our performance, where our performance is working, where it's not. To answer your question, I suppose in summary, they've been there at the right hand of the programme the whole way through. And if I was going to summarise it in one phrase, it's really keeping it honest as far as possible, and giving us a good assessment of what's really happening on the ground.
Just to add to that, Peter, I'm going to just take some time to understand the work of the Commission to date. I'm going to meet with the Commission, and I'm going to just see if there is a need to broaden their terms of reference or review their terms of reference in the scope of their work. But talking to them and learning from them as well, what they think needs to be done next in regards to this. The other element that, and we may come on to this, is in terms of the quality of the planning applications that are submitted. Often you find that there's significant information missing or incorrect information provided, which means even the statutory respondees have to go back and forth on this, which takes up time and resources we don't have. So the statutory checklist that we're currently proposing and will hopefully bring into legislation will also, I think, improve the planning system as well.
And secondly, Chair, renewable energy is going to play a really important role in terms of tackling climate change, and the department's going to try to meet key targets in terms of renewables, but they're continually getting blocked during the application process. Are there any plans to change that in some way to make it more easier for those renewable projects to come forward?
The challenge for renewable energies is at times, particularly say for instance windmills, that they can cause differences of opinions in local communities where they're being planned to be, and concerns will be raised. We have to go through the proper planning processes and ensure that all environmental considerations and biodiversity considerations are taken on board in that regard. It is quite time consuming. It can again be litigious in terms of challenges to decision making processes. It often requires public inquiry. We go back to the PAC in that regard. I have in my previous role in this mandate made decisions around the introduction of renewable energy, which aren't always universally popular when they're in the location they're going into. But if it's based on sound planning advice, I'm prepared to make that decision.
And lastly, Chair, apologies. The PAC has been mentioned. In terms of how I see the PAC, it's kind of the correlation. I think that was mentioned as well. And the Belfast Chamber brought out a really good report on this in terms of reform of the PAC. And it's been alluded to about the role of the Department of Justice. And the way I see it is, having met with the PAC actually during their stakeholder engagement session late last year, the PAC will be more as a facilitator of the planning policies that are coming through and the planning applications that are coming through and the appeals that are coming through. So I see it as a key sort of player in terms of facilitating those discussions, but I think DFI has a key role to play in terms of reform of the PAC. Can I get your thoughts on that?
Well, other than what I've already said about it, I'm reluctant to say too much comment on, because it does fall under another department and I don't want to be stepping on another minister's toe. But any reform of it has to fit in with the overall arching plans for improving our planning process. And I think as we go through this process, and even in terms of responding to the Audit Officer's report, we can certainly hint at it, for want of a better term, what we believe may be the way forward for the entire planning system. The PAC is an integral part of that.
I think that might be worthwhile bringing that up maybe in the executive to sort of iron that out, because it is. I do fear that it's being forgotten about almost, with DOJ as a sponsor of it. But in terms of the work that it's actually processing, I do think that will be more DFI connected, so it might be helpful bringing that up in executive.
Okay, thank you. Cahill, you've been very patient on planning, so thank you for that.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yeah, one of my favourite subjects, obviously. Minister, and you mentioned the audit office and the PASC report. I mean, see in terms of, I've listened to all the discussion about flooding, about area plans, responsibility of councils, and I know each of them has their own autonomy and you have responsibilities, but we certainly need to have a broader conversation. I mean, I welcome the fact that you're meeting NIW, because the NIW, whilst they've submitted their PC21 plan and have great ambitions, there's no point in saying that, there's 100 areas of constraint and we're looking 19,000 units, and some councils going and saying we're going to build 10,000 units in the next 10 years, whilst they're ambitious. We've got to be realistic, and what I would say in the whole plan thing, and I welcome some of the things that we can do in terms of recommendations arising from the report, we need to have a broader conversation. And I mean, some would come out in the debate in the chamber, but not all of it, because we've responsibility in talking to NIW, responsibility when the area plans comes about, because there's no point in saying we're going to target 10,000 homes or 15 when we can't do that collectively. And then obviously the flooding, there was a PPS 15 plan policy statement on flooding, which identified a number of areas, and we see you're correct and right in terms of some of the council areas have made decisions with a social housing programme. So what I would say, rather than a question to you, Minister, I mean, even a part of the work of the committee we'll need to look at, but having those broader conversations, economy in terms of development-led, planning as well, all those conversations need to be had, and maybe some of the new stuff you're bringing forward in terms of ideas for plan maybe lies in the conversation with the executive as well, in terms of funding and everything else. But that's my overview of it. If you want to comment, or maybe...
No, well, as I said during my introductory remarks, it starts here. Nothing can happen within our society in terms of economic development or community development or society development unless infrastructure gets it right. So we have to make sure we've got a viable wastewater treatment and fresh water flowing from our homes and one flowing to our homes moving forward. We have to have our roads infrastructure right. We have to ensure that renewable energy is in place, our planning systems in place. We have to get all that working in unity together, or else nothing happens. So I'd said at a conference the other day, you could as easily call my department the Department of Economy. You could call my department the Department of Communities as well, in terms of that, without stepping on any other minister's toes, because unless we deliver the projects we're involved in, then none of the rest of it happens. So it starts here.
Okay, thank you. Mark?
Thank you, Chair. Most of the points have been made, particularly I was going to raise on the sort of renewable energy obligations, and not just your big wind farms, but also smaller stuff that the planning, I suppose, system could be more amenable to or flexible towards. I know there's been stuff done now on reverse vending machines with anticipation of a bottle deposit return scheme coming in and that, but even if we look at stuff like vehicle chargers and that as we move towards more electric vehicles, so it's to ensure that all departments are working together on that. One of the points that have been made there about the resourcing of councils, and the question as to whether that was adequate, but the resourcing of planning within your own department, Minister, is probably nowhere near adequate. And it's how that marries up with another thing, and it was basically about the department marking council's homework, and we talked about it in regards to flooding. If a council passes something that Rivers Agency are saying, no, you shouldn't be doing that, I know you probably take a view on that and have demonstrated in the past, not specific to flooding, but that, well, the council are elected there, the councillors, the committee, they've taken that decision, it's a local decision. What's the threshold then for when the department calls something in or not? Because particularly with the lack of resources in the department, I know a decision had been made by your predecessor, so I'm not blaming you for this by any means, to call in a retail application in my own constituency, yet it took a year for the department to realise, oh, we don't have a retail expert in-house, and then they'd go out and advertise to get one in, and then more than 2 years later a decision still hasn't been made on the decision that the council unanimously supported.
Each decision has to be made on its own merits, and my department has responsibility for strategic oversight of the planning system, and as you know only too well, powers to call in. I am of the view that local councillors are best placed in relation to the majority of planning decisions. It would be with great reluctance for me to call in a planning application. I obviously have to look at the advice of my officials and take into consideration my legislative responsibilities as well. But I suppose in many ways I'm looking on the basis of you elect your councillors to serve your local community. You need to be comfortable then with what decisions they make locally. And it is getting that balance right, Mark, in terms of ensuring that there is social and economic development across the board and delivering it quickly. I'm acutely aware that my departments, despite the often going above and beyond the call of duty, there's many sections of my department that are under-resourced and understaffed, including the planning. And I'm looking at how I can improve that. I have a responsibility there as well. I just can't pass the buck. I'm looking at how I can improve that. But when I'm making my decisions, I'm saying to myself, if I make that decision in that regard, what knock-on effect does that have across the entire system? So I look at it in its entire spectrum, but obviously the main focus has to be my legislative responsibilities.
There's a real difficulty that exists for planning committees. I'm not trying to get them off the hook and give the minister the difficulty, but if an application comes in Rivers Agency are saying there's flood risk and it's got a social housing sticker on the application, and we all know of the acute profound need for housing, I think sometimes then you'll be hard pushed to find a committee to vote against a social housing scheme, regardless of what statutory consultees are saying, whereas if it was a private scheme it would be left out of the chamber. It's ultimately the end user or inhabitant who's put at risk.
I think there is a valid point there where local representatives want to be providing social and affordable housing. One of the things perhaps we should be looking at is how that housing is designed. And it's what you're building on the floodplain in the anticipation of a flood coming. In my opinion, there's no point in building a standard property on a floodplain if you know it's going to flood. So if you want to build a property on a floodplain, then design, if you can, design in such a way that minimises the risk, rather than just planting it down there and saying, oh, in 10 or 30 years' time, saying, oh, I didn't know that was going to happen.
Okay, Keith, I just want to check, do you want to raise anything in relation to planning before we move on? Just I don't see your hand up, and I just wanted to check.
No, I've nothing in planning, but I've two other quick topics to cover.
Right, that's okay. Well,
sure, I'm just conscious of time.
Yes,
as well, so.
For your time.
We really do have to move on. Can we just very quickly touch on roads and transport, please? Because I do appreciate you have given the committee quite a bit of time today. Obviously, TransLink have rejected the pay awards. So where does this leave us now? And in terms of, I know you did respond to the committee in terms of your role, but where does this leave us now with TransLink? And again, obviously looking at the budgetary situation as well.
I'm disappointed that accommodation hasn't been found. And the unions have rejected this quite overwhelmingly, it has to be said, or the workers have rejected it quite overwhelmingly. And I think that's a signal of the frustration that has built up over many years in relation to a low pay agenda across the public sector. I think that vote reflects that. I'm conscious that TransLink and the unions are meeting today, and they're going to discuss what options, if any, are available to either side moving forward, and I wish those discussions well, and I don't want to say anything that would hinder those discussions. I think that when parties are around a table talking to each other, as we know as politicians, it's only beneficial, so I wish them well in those discussions.
Thanks for that. And I've noticed that the Minister has made quite a number of roads announcements, and whilst that's very welcome, I'm just wondering, is the Minister focused on roads and roads announcements whenever there are so many competing pressures like we've talked about today?
The roads, and many of the roads announcements you're seeing coming out at the moment is as a direct result of the investment I made not long coming in to office, and also the reallocation of fundings by the executive. So I got around £5 million in the executive, and I redistributed about £3 million in my own department for significant road projects and £1 million for potholes. So that's why our roads are seeing quite a significant investment at this stage of the financial year. I'm not particularly overly focused on the roads, but I do know our roads, and we all know our roads are in particularly bad shape. Some areas, and I have to be conscious that I have a safety issue in relation to our roads. They are an asset to the department, which I have to maintain moving forward. So yes, there has been quite significant investment in roads, but I do intend, as part of the budgetary process, planning a long-term budget. I was going to use the term solution. I'm not sure if we'll be able to solve any problems or all the problems with the current budgetary programme we have, but I intend to be working to a yearly budgetary programme rather than an immediate programme, which I've had to do recently.
And lastly, for me, in terms of this issue, community transport, you will understand there's quite a strong sense of feeling within communities about the role of rural community transport, and I will have seen that the last time when it looked like funding streams were going to be cut from that. So can the Minister give any indication today of whether funding will be in place for community transport and what that funding stream will look like in the future going forward?
You'll appreciate that we're in the midst of our budgetary processes, and I'm still awaiting confirmation of my budget. I have confirmed the budget for community transport for the next 2 months, as I've done for a number of areas within my department. It's my intention to protect community transport as best I can, but I can't make any further confirmation beyond that because I simply don't have a confirmed budget for the rest of the financial year.
Okay, members, quick fire answers. So, Deputy Chair.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Minister, I totally agree and echo your points regarding the transport workers. I think that is something we need to get over the line. The fear out there that strikes, could be imminent is obviously real, and hopefully that's not the case. In terms of infrastructure projects, one big one that's been on the table for absolutely years is York Street Interchange, and I see from the papers today there's a 3-point options paper being prepared shortly. It's the case. I'm just curious to tease out. I mean, we have a letter today, Chair, from a concerned resident raising the issue, and this has been an ongoing matter. They reckon between £8 and £10 million per year it costs the local economy not to develop it. I'm just wondering, do you think in terms of this mandate that is something that you would be able to get off the ground in terms of a capital project, or how feasible would that be? Because the economic impact, Mr. could be astronomical for that area.
I would certainly hope that I'll be advancing the York Street project while I'm in office. But again, it comes down to a number of factors, including budget, and being able to go through all the regulatory processes I have to go through when I'm dealing with a major road infrastructure project. But I would hope to advance it in my term of office.
Okay, Peter.
A few quick questions. You mentioned about legislation, this coming mandate about the zero emission vehicle mandate. I'm conscious it's been passed in England, Scotland and Wales already. I think it was late last year it came through in the House of Commons. So can you tell us a little bit about what that's going to entail, and if you have a timescale for its introduction and hopefully passing as well? And I say that against the backdrop of about, I think 1% of charging points in the UK or in Northern Ireland, so we're really behind in terms of that. So what are your thoughts in terms of
we did fall behind as the Assembly was down, that legislation was passed through Westminster and elsewhere. I'm examining that legislation and see how we can develop the legislation here and support in terms of electric vehicles moving forward, but it is at an early stage. Though the legislation itself, as the Westminster model, is well developed, we need to just say ourselves, do we develop that model or do we develop our own unique model?
And then secondly,
the
£8.1 million that was announced, part of that took from active travel grants. I think it's been announced certainly today in written questions to other members as well. And I have been in correspondence with DFI officials about the active schools grant. So I'm just wondering about that rationale to take from the active travel side of things.
The active travel, it was capital funding. As far as I'm aware, the active travel for schools is resource, so it's two different budgetary pots. It was money that simply wasn't going to be spent in this year. There has been delays, as you do with road projects. There are delays in getting some of the active travel, greenways, etc., off the ground, because they can be complex projects in their own rights, and you're dealing with a multitude of different landowners and etc. and interests, etc. So there was a delay in some of the active travel capital spend. I had a choice of returning that money to the centre or spending it on something else, and I chose to spend it on something else.
Okay, Danny.
Oh, good, Chair. John, thank you for your time and all the questions so far. It's been a good debate, and we've done it over the last number of weeks and the priorities. And one of the underbelly of all of it is really the climate change and the part it's playing and flooding and how we plan. I suppose just we touched on our own wee areas, everyone did anyway, so I'm just going to do it a wee tiny bit if you don't mind. And it's really around active travel, as Peter mentioned, and safe cycle lanes. And if I just use West Belfast as an example, we don't even have 1 kilometre of a safe cycle lane, so if I want to take the kids to school on their bikes, I can't. So it's just on that, and then really the draft road safety strategy as well, and the importance of maybe changing and raising awareness to improve drivers' behaviours.
In relation to safe cycle lanes, etc., there's clearly going to have to be a greater investment, and my department is going to have a responsibility to spend 10% of its capital or transport budget in relation to active travel. That's a responsibility I take quite seriously, and we're going to therefore to have to invest that on issues such as safe cycle lanes, etc. There's also a quite an exciting project you'll be aware in terms of a greenway in West Belfast as well, which I engaged with when I was previously Minister, which I would also like to see advanced as well, because the more people we can divert away from the private car, either onto public transport or into active travel, then the better for our society. And Dennis was at the Walking and Cycle Index report yesterday, which is quite an exciting report and shows the benefits to our society. So the benefits are proven. We now have to prove ourselves in the delivery of infrastructure to support that. In terms of, sorry, what was your second question, Donny?
It's just a draft road safety strategy.
Yes, I hope to be able to present that to the executive colleagues in the coming months. There's 3 elements to it in terms of how we promote road safety. There is the actual infrastructure of a road, and it's ensuring that that's safe for use for both vehicular traffic, pedestrians and cyclists and others using that. There's to ensure that our vehicles are safe, and we've seen that in terms of discussions around the MOTs, etc. We've already been through that, and then ensuring road user attitude. And one of the biggest causes of deaths and injuries on our roads is through the driver or a person. A momentary lapse of concentration can have horrific consequences for the individual and others. So it's about ensuring that road users' attitudes are always minded to be, whatever they're doing on the road, whether you're a driver, whether you're a pedestrian, whether you're a cyclist, wherever it may be, that you're ensuring that your actions on the road are ensuring that you're safe and that other road users are safe as well.
Okay. Happy enough. So I have 3 more members. So again, quick fire, quick answers. So Patrick.
I think I was in that quickly, Chair, thank you. The Minister will know I've written to him previously about the Ballinhinch bypass,
yes.
And that he said that was, it wasn't much of an update, to be honest, just that it would be updated in due course. But I can see from the front page of my local paper that your colleague Chris Hazard has secured a commitment to review that decision, whereby the project was previously downgraded in terms of priority. Can I get a bit of information on when that review will take place and when we're likely to find out your decision in relation to it?
I haven't seen your local newspaper, right?
It just says Minister will review, and of
right.
course your colleague has welcomed that decision, which is very positive. Well, I thank your colleague for his diligence and of course bringing that to the attention of the local press.
There was a number of major projects that were put on hold as a result of a lack of finances. They were put on hold at a certain stage of development because of a lack of financial capability of moving them forward. And what I have said in relation to a number of these projects is that I'm keeping all of that under review, because as major projects move their way through my department, some will advance quicker than others. So there might be a pot of money allocated to project A, which I may be able to spend in this financial year or the next financial year or the financial year after that. And I'd say, right, I need to make a decision on project A may not move as quick as I thought. I'll have to bring in project B or project C. So that's what I'm doing at the moment. There's a number of, obviously, I have to have my capital budget confirmed. That will give me an idea, or will give me a confirmation of what I can spend in this year. As I say, those projects that are moving about, it's a constant moving picture when you're dealing with major projects. I'm going to sit down with my officials and say, right, look, what do we know? And what we know is this. Then I'm not going to have either staff resources or financial commitment to projects that I know aren't going to move. I'm going to move them somewhere else to projects that can move. So that's the idea of that review.
Okay, thank you. Keith, very quickly, please.
Okay, I'll roll out three and one very quickly. You've referred to community transport, and I welcome your commitment to that. In the papers, it refers to you're doing like a sort of review on that, touch on that briefly. And shop mobility, I just want you to maybe comment on that more broadly, and obviously what it does. And lastly, the 20 mile/hour speed limit for schools, and the rollout of that. I would make one comment. I had spoke to your officials in the past that a 20 mile/hour flashing orange light to make you aware of that. Could the minister or could your officials look at reviewing that to include a SID to indicate that speed you're doing, which will have a bigger impact, a visual impact to the driver? So 3 points in one, Minister.
Well, we'll go in reverse order. Yes, I can ask officials to review that. Though a cursory understanding of some of these things is that the longer a sign is in place, the less attention a motorist pays to it. I think that is a factor in these decision-making process, and it comes back to the debate we had in the Chamber last night about the rationale behind certain policies. And I would encourage the committee to, and I'm sure you as well, to bring my officials in and discuss those in detail around that, because there is interesting facts and figures behind all that and data behind that. In terms of shop mobility, again, it comes down to my budget and how I can support all those organisations. I have an invite in from Shop Mobility to meet, and I will honour that invite and meet them in due course. And the community transport issue is, as I've said, I'm keeping it under review. I've committed to the next 2 months, and when I have my budget confirmed, I will do what I can in terms of that sector and every other sector I support.
Okay, Keith, happy enough. We
Okay,
can move
thanks,
on.
Minister. Thanks, Chair. Thank
Okay,
you.
Mark.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for your time, Minister. It's, I'd say, if not unprecedented, it's certainly unusual for a Minister to give this level of time.
If I do that, I
we'll see.
will.
Well, we don't get through today, we'll raise next week when you're on
Thanks
again.
very much.
The A6, I'll have your head done in about this. There's been great work done. It makes a huge difference to people travelling from and to my constituency between there and Belfast and anywhere in between or beyond. The final piece of the jigsaw, if you like, from Drumahoe to Caw, it's really how your department and DAERA will work together to overcome the issue around the Maboy dump that has been floated as one of the reasons for delay to this project. But I'd see it rather than a problem, maybe as an opportunity for your departments to work together and jointly to actually go and bid for the money. Well, they'll be looking for the money to do the remediation. You can be looking for the money to actually complete the road scheme, or to look even at where you might be able to start that final phase of the work as well, even prior to the remediation of Maboy, because it's been a fantastic project, but it needs finished because the situation at Drumahoe currently is just completely mad.
Yeah, the A6 phase 1 has been a huge success and huge benefit to motorists who travel that road on a regular basis. Maboy dump is, as you know, a huge problem in terms of us planning the next phase of the A6. We are engaged with DAERA around this. Now, DAERA are lead in terms of the legal issues around all these things, and in terms of bidding for money, etc. I'm not sure we're at the stage yet, Mark, where, and DAERA probably best answers as to who's going to be legally responsible for the actual cleaning up of that site. So that causes us a challenge. But I have engaged and will continue to engage with my officials around the A6 on what we can do next to progress that. Whether that's, and if you looked at a different route, that's several years of work. You know, you'd appreciate that. But can we go a certain distance or do whatever we can? I am engaging that with our officials around that. See what we can do. And it's just on the A6, and I always like raising this figure. We've planted somewhere in the region of 1.6 million trees along that route. Like for a department, it's often scoff where all we do is build roads. I'm not sure there's any other agency or department that can boast be proud of that. The huge biodiversity benefit is unbelievable.
Well, look, Minister, I just really appreciate your time, and also Permanent Secretary, we're really deeply appreciative of your time today, because you did go through an awful lot of the committee. It's just to say, as a committee, we do want to work with the department. We're here to scrutinise, but certainly we do want to try and work with the committee, and we're also on the page of solution mode as well. And we'll have seen that from the debate on MOT. Certainly there were members who were coming up with ideas and were bringing forward proposals in terms of what the department could do. So certainly we want to continue in that vein. We look forward hopefully to having you at some stage again, albeit not next week, you'll be glad to hear. But we do thank you for your time today, so thank you.
There's a few other issues, but I'm just thinking maybe we'll write to the department or to the committee.
There was only just one thing we're going to raise, and it was only you're going to be getting a briefing from TransLink colleagues, and obviously they'll want to tell you about the fantastic development that the Grand Central Station will be. However, just wanted to mention, because we're starting to get close to delivery, there will be inevitably challenges around traffic and disruption. And I know that's something the Minister's keen to get out as early as possible. So we wanted to do the committee the service of saying to you, just if it didn't come up, that this is something we're looking at very closely. You will want to talk to TransLink colleagues as well, and they'll be very happy to talk to you. The Minister met with them yesterday on this, so just wanted to make sure that was on your agenda.
Okay.
As you know, it's a hugely significant investment in Belfast City Centre and for our entire transport network. But like everything like this, sometimes you have to break a few eggs to make an omelette, and it's going to cause huge traffic disruption. But there's a plan in place, but I think the committee would be benefit from a briefing on it. I may also make a statement to the Assembly, just so there's a broader discussion on it, to alert road users, etc. There's going to have to be a change of mode, which might be a good thing in the long term. If we get more people on the public transport, the better.
Yeah,
okay.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Much appreciated. Thank you very much. Yeah, it'll be later. Okay, members, that was a marathon, but like appreciate you working with me there on that, and I'm sure like the Minister did give quite comprehensive answers there in relation to a number of things, and I know members have raised some of those issues in ministerial questions as well, but just seek agreement to receive a response from the department on any issues that were not raised or covered, because we'll see from the clerk's brief there might have been some questions there we didn't get to, so you're content with that?
Please.
Okay. We'll now move to item 8, which is the subordinate legislation SL1s not subject to Assembly proceedings. I advise members that there are 4 proposals for statutory rules that are not subject to Assembly procedure and are not required to be laid. A list summarising the statutory rules is at page 185 of members' packs, and the rules at pages 186 to 197. So page 186 is the SL1, the Parking and Waiting Restrictions Ban Bridge Amendment Order, Northern Ireland 2024. The rule will introduce a no waiting restriction between 8:30 a.m. and 6:15 p.m. Monday to Saturday, inclusive, loading and unloading permitted on a length of Kenlis Court Banbridge. Are members content with the proposal for the statutory rule?
Yeah.
At page 189 is SL1, the Parking and Waiting Restrictions Banbridge Amendment Number 2 Order, Northern Ireland 2024. The rule will introduce a no waiting restriction between 8:30 a.m. and 6:15 p.m. Monday to Saturday, inclusive, loading and unloading permitted on a length of Kenlis Street, Banbridge. Are members content with the proposal for the statutory rule?
Yes.
At page 192 is the SL1, the Parking and Waiting Restrictions Banbridge Amendment Number 3 Order, Northern Ireland 2024. The proposed rule will prohibit vehicles waiting at any time, loading and unloading permitted on a length of Scarva Street, Banbridge. Vehicles are accepted from the prohibitions in certain circumstances. Are members content with the proposal for the statutory rule? At page 195 is SL1, the road races Croft Hill climb order at Northern Ireland 2024. The rule will permit the suspension of the right-of-way of traffic on Saturday the 13th of April 2024 between 9:30am and 5:30pm on lengths of Benmanock Road and Crichton's Green Road, Hollywood, County Down, to allow the Thoroughbred Sports Car Club Northern Ireland as a promoter of the Croft Hill Climb 2024 to run the event. Are members content with the proposal for the statutory rule?
Right down to the last letter, yeah.
I'm glad. Item 9 is SL1, the Green Road Conlig Abandonment Order Northern Ireland 2024. Members will see at page 198 is the Clerk's memo, and at page 200 is a proposal for the statutory rule. This rule is subject to negative resolution. The rule will abandon an area of 1,358 square metres of superseded road, which will include an old stone bridge at Green Road, Conlig, extending from a point of 974.5 metres west of its junction with Newtownards Road for a distance of 134 metres in an easterly direction. The proposal has been requested by a developer to facilitate the construction of a new housing development. The area of land to be abandoned is partly owned by the developer and partly unregistered. 9 objections were received, none of which have been withdrawn. So I'm advising members that this is the committee's opportunity to consider the policy set out in the SL1, as it is not possible to amend the statutory rule once it has been made and laid in the Assembly Business Office. And I want to advise members that we have Ronnie Balfour, Head of Transport Legislation Branch, here from the Department of Infrastructure, and he is available to answer any questions the committee may have. So I'm going to ask, are members content with the proposal for the statutory rule?
Sorry, the members.
Yeah.
Do members want to hear from?
Well, yeah,
Do
so
members,
did I hear
yeah.
this,
Do you want to?
Yeah. Come up
Sorry.
and give an explanation, please.
Nature,
Objections, yeah.
the nature of the objections would be useful as well.
Yeah.
Chair.
Let's hear what.
Good afternoon.
Thank you for coming, and I'm sorry for keeping you waiting. So do you just want to give us a brief outline, please, of what the situation here is?
Yes, this is a piece of legislation, abandonment order. Essentially, it emanates from a request by the developer for the department to abandon a section of land which it intended to utilise as part of a housing development. Essentially, it's the department's policy to dispose of assets that are no longer required for the effective functioning of the road network. And essentially, this is a disused section of road which runs over the top includes the railway bridge. Back early 90s, an improvement scheme essentially put in place a road that runs adjacent to this old disused road. So therefore, the department has no need, no requirement to maintain the disused road. The developer wanted the scope to be able to adjust the layout of houses within that development and driveways and so on. So essentially, as I say, the department's policy is to dispose of assets that are no longer required to facilitate the operation of the network. The department had no plans to utilise that particular area and the old superseded road. So essentially, that's where we are, and that's why we're bringing the piece of legislation. When an abandonment order essentially comes into operation, the road ceases to be maintainable by the department, so that removes the road from the public road network, reduces our maintenance commitment, and clearly the burden on the public person. As you're well aware, there are considerable pressures on the department in terms of its maintenance budget.
Can you just detail the nature of the objections raised? What were they centred around?
Yeah, there were 9 objections raised, and there was a degree of commonality in terms of the objections. The historic nature of the bridge and concerns that it might be demolished, general local interest in the wider heritage, the impact on wildlife. The bridge has become disused, it's quite overgrown, and obviously habitat for wildlife and so on. Reference is made to the All Ireland Rail Review. The Old Cumber North Down Railway line essentially ran under the disused bridge. And then a final concern related to the promotion of greenways, and the concern, I suppose, was that abandoning that area might constrain future development of greenways in the area.
I'm also aware that there was a public petition in relation to it, so the department didn't highlight that in their letter, and that was presented. The petition was presented to the Assembly on the 28th of February 2022. So
that's correct.
Yeah,
583 signatures on that petition.
Okay. Is there a reason why the petition maybe wasn't raised in the letter to the committee?
I can only say due to an oversight. As I say, it.
Treated as one objection then.
It wasn't part of the formal objection period had expired at that point. So Mr. Muir had essentially I think sponsored the petition, and the department understands clearly. There's a lot of connection and affection, I suppose, for the heritage in the area. And this is a part of that. But that petition was clearly considered by the department as part of its considerations and deliberations.
Okay. I'll move to members. Deputy Chair, are you okay? Patrick Brown?
Thanks, Chair, and thanks for that, Ronnie. I suppose you've made reference to 9 objectors, but there's clearly almost 600 there. It says 546 in our packs. You made reference to 580 something. Over 500 is quite substantial for what is, from my reading, a fairly hyper-local issue. So to have that level of interest in something like this, I think we do need to take that under consideration. And I don't feel that I quite have enough information about the local area to just sign off on this, given the level of local concern. I'd also like to ask if there has been any efforts that you know of to consult with local heritage groups or wildlife groups or other parties who may be also interested in the land to potentially consider alternative uses. I'm assuming that the department obviously has no strategic interest in terms of the All Ireland Rail Review or Greenway development or anything like that. The local council as well, of course, would be good to hear their view on it in terms of the role that they have in terms of local travel partnerships, active travel partnerships and stuff like that. So, can you just get a bit more information on this, really?
Yeah, number of different dimensions raised there. Maybe go in reverse order. In terms of greenways, the area of land included in the proposed abandonment excludes an area with that potential in the event of, as you're aware, our department provides funding to councils who essentially to bring forward proposals for greenways. So essentially there has been an area of land left clear, which would be the obvious piece of land that would be utilised for promotion of a future greenway project. So that aspect has been taken on board. The department will always listen to the voice of the public, take on board concerns. As I say, we have engaged with DFC's Historic Environment Division in terms of what its assessment is of the structure, and they have indicated that clearly it would be a material consideration in any future planning application, which obviously a developer might take forward in the future.
In terms of engagement with any other organisations that might have an interest in the land?
Well, I suppose, sorry, I forgot that aspect of it. I suppose one of the potential benefits of the abandonment process is that, for instance, it's quite a complex for a very small area. Part of it is owned by the developer, part of it is owned by the department, part of it is unregistered, and ownership is undefined. So hypothetically, should the abandonment proceed, the section that the department owns would essentially be put forward for disposal through government procedures. So one particular benefit of the abandonment would be that it would provide the opportunity for potentially the council or other heritage groups to actually express interest in acquiring that. Clearly they would have a much more dedicated and focused approach in terms of the management of that asset, in terms of caring for it, looking after it, maintaining it. And as you rightly say, from a strategic point of view, the department essentially, because it is no longer part of the active road network, its focus is on the network and dealing with those particular pressures. That's not to say that clearly at the moment we are responsible for maintaining the structure, albeit that is very, very minimal at the moment.
But a public sector or non-profit organisation would essentially get first refusal then through the D1 process?
The trawl process initially would go to public bodies, and there would be an opportunity either for a public body or indeed a public body acting as a sponsor for another third-party entity to then come forward and express interest, and the rest then would... And the department certainly would be very sympathetic to that. It understands the strong local sentiment that there is to preserve this part of the heritage. The challenge to the department is clearly that it has a vast network to maintain, and there would be people who would be better suited to take that particular role forward.
Okay, I'm going to move to Mark.
Most have been covered there, Chair. Just in terms of the potential impact on future rail developments, sorry, Ronnie, I missed what you'd said in relation to that, and is there not another wing of the department somewhere that would frown on any such potential? The
emerging findings on the All-Ireland Rail Review, well, it's not my area of expertise, you forgive me, there's no reference to anything happening in terms of restoration of the railway line between Comber and Donaghadee, which essentially that's the railway line that is impacted. It does mention the Belfast to Bangor railway line, so realistically very unlikely that rail. But
well, many years ago you'd have said all of it was unrealistic. Do you know what we're looking at? Developing now. I'm aware of a planning application that was passed in Derry a couple of years ago for social housing that similarly was on an old track bed, and now the department have found themselves in a situation where they might have to buy out the planning permission for an excess of £1 million. So it might seem unrealistic now, but it can't be ruled out.
Certainly, as of now, our department has no plans and doesn't anticipate any developments along that particular area of land.
Okay, Cahill.
I'm just trying to get my head around. I mean, you said what has local council said about it, and secondly, the actual development issue. I mean, it has to be abandoned for a reason as to meet sightlines, or what's the exact reason for the abandonment itself? And the developer itself. Could you talk us through that, please?
Yeah, the developer, I suppose, the developer requested the abandonment to I suppose just give them further scope in terms of the layout of their houses and the driveways. So the bridge and the disused road encroaches on that particular area of land. The developer only owns a portion of that. The department owns part, and part unregistered. So essentially, the department has no particular strategic interest in the section that it currently owns. The developer clearly has. So from our point of view, we have no strategic reason to retain that, and if there are other parties that would wish to utilise it in a more effective way, then we're amenable to the abandonment.
Is it for sidelines, or was it?
No, it's not for sidelines.
Right,
It's actually it's off the main route,
Okay.
and essentially it's just from the point of view of it encroaches. I think one concern I think that the developer did raise in their application request was a concern about the deterioration in the condition of the structure, and given the development of houses in the close proximity, children being children, and their propensity to explore interesting structures, health and safety concerns would be another matter.
And local council, what local council?
Local council were consulted as part of the general application process and did not comment.
And who owns the structure?
It is partly owned by the developer. A section is owned by there are three interested parties. Yes.
And local authority has no issue with it to give the
local authority was as I say, part of the consultation and made no comment.
Made no comment, even though there was something like 550 concerns.
Okay.
I don't know where we can go with. I mean,
I just see someone else is indicating there, so I'll come back to you just on what you want to propose there. But Keith?
Yeah, just Cathal made the point, I think, Mark previously, the 500 odd objectors, or should I say signatories on a piece of paper, is that classified as one objector?
That petition was not submitted as part of the official consultation process, so they are not part of the 9 objectors.
Okay, and second point, Chair, I'm looking at a little map or a Google image here on the phone. There's a house, exactly one. There's a row of houses here in Rowanvale Crescent, and the row of houses have come up within one house width of this bridge. Just for clarity on ownership, who actually owns the bridge, the actual bridge?
The very central section of the bridge, more or less the section that the archway over the arch is owned by the developer. The section of the embankment to the left is owned by the developer as well. There's then a further section on the other part of the embankment that the department owns, and then there are 2 other portions which are unregistered and ownership is undefined at this stage.
And is any listing on that bridge?
No. Now, Historic Environment Division have indicated that they regard it as just bear with me one moment to get the specific terminology. Yes, they have recorded it as a site of industrial archaeology interest on the industrial heritage record, and certainly there they have indicated that it would be a material consideration in any planning application, and the desire would clearly be to retain the bridge from a heritage perspective.
Okay, Keith?
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Chair.
The Deputy Chair has just
thanks.
indicated again, just for a question.
Thanks, Chair. Well, you've given quite a lot of information on this. Usually these go through the nod, and there are areas that we wouldn't be in much knowledge about. Certainly many that haven't come up, but clearly there is a significant amount of interest in this. Just to get my head around, because Cathal was discussing it, sort of what's the options next that Patrick referred to as well, about information being required. If we don't approve it today, what are the implications? And am I right in saying the options currently are to defer pending more information and potentially a site visit, or is that an option to come back to it, or what is the time limit on this, Chair? Can we get?
Yeah.
Is that an option to?
The Minister has clearly approved the making of the legislation. However, that's clearly coming to the committee.
Yeah.
So if the committee doesn't object, then it would, after 30 days, become law. It is of course subject to the negative resolution process as well, which is another avenue where an MLA, and we are aware of considerable interest by various parties, Mr. Muir, Mr. Easton, etc. They could bring a motion to the Assembly as well to pray against it and annul the statutory rules. So those are opportunities. Certainly more than happy to provide whatever further information you may wish and request.
Well, it was just interesting there that you said about the council and having, you know, written to the council and they didn't respond or provide any, because obviously they would have first dibs, so to speak. So, you know, I was even thinking down the line of, you know, if the committee was content with the proposal, I could write to the council, but I think that's maybe been exhausted in ways, has it?
Well, as I said, we write out to all the standard consultees and essentially, you know, statutory undertakers as well. So every party has the opportunity to raise concerns, to have queries, which obviously then departmental officials will investigate, look into, and respond to. The council chose not to do so.
Yeah.
We have responded to the other objections, gone back to the objectors, explaining the rationale and why we believe it would be appropriate to move forward, to try to, I suppose, explain the rationale for that. Now, none of the objectors have formally withdrawn their objections.
Sorry, do you want to come in?
Chair, it's just thinking about the fact that possibly the council made its decision prior to its knowledge of the petition. Therefore, in hindsight, with the petition, were the committee to write to the council, they may wish to reconsider that. And as you rightly said, Chair, they do have first refusal. So whether the committee wants to hear from the council or write to the council and get a response prior to making a decision.
Keith, I see your hands up. Do you want to ask a question, or is this to propose something? Because Cahill was going to propose something there, Keith, so just want to check with you.
No, that was I hadn't taken down. Apologies.
Okay. Cahill?
No, Chair, just to explain, because in my time, it's very seldom we challenge, or it's very seldom anything's been prayed against. I just would like further clarification just before a decision was made. Now, I know there's a time frame, but I mean, I'm just trying to get a look at it here myself and reading it through the day. There is objections to it. I think as responsibility from committee, we need to just have a proper look at it. And I would write to the council and say exactly what to say and get further clarification.
Just for clarity, the 30-day rule does not kick in until after the statutory rule is made and laid in the Business Office. We're currently at the policy proposal stage, so the committee has significant time to look at this.
So are members content then that we take that action of writing to the council just to seek some further clarity and outlining maybe the concerns or suggestion it may wish to reconsider again? Are members content to take that approach?
That was a proposal,
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Ronnie, for coming to the committee today.
Sure.
We appreciate your information. Thank you.
You have to slip it as well.
Okay. So we'll now hopefully fly through some of the rest here, so I'll read double quick before the Education Committee comes. So we move to item 10, that's subordinate legislation SRs not subject to Assembly procedures. Advise members that there are 10 statutory rules that are not subject to Assembly procedure. A list of the statutory rules can be found at page 204 and the rules are included in the members' packs at pages 205 to 250. I want to ask members if they have any issues they wish to raise in any of the proposals. Okay, and I'm going to ask members to note the statutory rules. Okay?
Great.
So item 11 is SR 2024-22, the Motor Vehicles Driving Licences Amendment Regulations Northern Ireland 2024. Page 252 is a statutory rule. I advise members that the purpose of this rule is to amend the Motor Vehicles Driving Licences Regulations Northern Ireland 1996. The driving licence regulations to insert a new provision into driving licence regulations 55ZA. The new provision extends the period for holders of a Ukrainian licence to drive on that licence in Northern Ireland from 1 year, 12 months after becoming resident in Northern Ireland to 3 years, 36 months, or up to the point in time at which they leave the UK. This increase matches the length of the visa they have been granted, a family sponsor and extension visa schemes. This extension would only apply to the driving of a vehicle in Category A, motorcycle, and Category B, car. There are no changes to the policy content since the committee considered the policy proposal on the 21st of February 2024. The rule is subject to negative resolution. Are members content with this rule? So I'll read.
Chair, just to add that the Examiner of Statutory Rules has reported and had no comment to make on the rule.
Apologies.
So
Yeah.
that changes the question then.
Yeah, so I'll read the motion then, that the Committee for Infrastructure has considered SR 2024-22, the Motor Vehicles Driving Licences Amendment Regulations Northern Ireland 2024, and has no objection to the rule. Content. Item 12 is a SR 2024-33, the Beachfield Drive Donaghadee Abandonment Order Northern Ireland 2024. At page 261 is the statutory rule. Advise members that the purpose of the rule is to abandon an area of 70 square metres of road fronting numbers 34, 36 and 38, Beachfield Drive Donaghadee. On the coming into operation of the rule, the Department will no longer be responsible for the maintenance of the road in question, and the public right-of-way over it shall be extinguished. There have been no changes to the policy content since the proposal was considered by the committee on the 20th of February 2024. The rule is subject to negative resolution. Are members content with the statutory rule? Content. So I'll read the motion that the Committee for Infrastructure has considered SR 2024-33, the Beachfield Drive Donaghadee Abandonment Order Northern Ireland 2024, and subject to the ESR's report has no objection to the rule. So item 13 is SR 2024-34, the Carrickman Road Crossgar Abandonment Order Northern Ireland 2024. At page 269 is the statutory rule. I advise members that the purpose of the rule is to abandon an area of 231 square metres of superseded road at Carrickman Road, Crossgar, commencing at a point 26 metres east of its junction with Mance Road and continuing for a distance of 35 metres in a northerly direction. There have been no changes to the policy content since the proposal was considered by the committee on the 28th of February 2024. The rule is subject to negative resolution. Are members content with the statutory rule?
Yeah.
I'll read the motion that the Committee for Infrastructure has considered SR 2024-34, the Carrickman Road Crossgar Abandonment Order Northern Ireland 2024, and subject to the ESR's report has no objection to the rule. Item 14 is the SR 2024-35, the Back Street at Botanic Avenue and Donegal Pass, Belfast Abandonment Order Northern Ireland 2024. At page 277 is the statutory rule, and I advise members that the purpose of this rule is to abandon an area of 58 square metres of superseded road extending from Ratcliffe Street, Belfast, to the rear of number 12A Botanic Avenue, Belfast. There have been no changes to the policy content since the committee considered the policy proposal on the 28th of February 2024. The rule is subject to negative resolution. Are members content with the statutory rule?
Yeah.
So I'll read the motion that the Committee for Infrastructure has considered SR 2024-35, the Back Street at Botanic Avenue and Donegal Pass, Belfast Abandonment Order Northern Ireland 2024, and subject to the ESR's report has no objection to the rule. Item 15 is SR 2024-40, the Bayhead Road, Port Ballantrae Footway Abandonment Order Northern Ireland 2024. At page 285 is a statutory rule, and I advise members that the purpose of this rule is to abandon an area of 37.9 square metres of footway in front of number 52 Bayhead Road, Port Ballantrae. There have been no changes to the policy content since the committee considered the policy proposal on the 28th of February 2024. The rule is subject to negative resolution. Are members content with the statutory rule? So I'll read the motion that the Committee for Infrastructure has considered SR 2024-40, the Bayhead Road, Port Ballantrae Footway Abandonment Order, Northern Ireland 2024, and subject to the ESR's report has no objection to the rule. Okay, we'll now move to our forward work programme. I do just want to discuss this with members, if members are content to go into closed session. But before we do, can I ask if members have any other business? No.
Yes, Chair, no.
And then just to confirm that the date time of the next meeting will take place at 10 a.m. on the 20th of March 2024 in room 29, Parliament Buildings. Okay, and we'll move into closed session just to discuss this item.
Committee Room 29. Sound. Committee Room 29. Sound. Committee Room 29. Sound. Committee Room 29. Sound. Committee Room 29. Sound.